Chapter 31:10. The sea beasts in the depths of Guiha Sea are really going to become demons. Xiaohua didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he gave in and went to other places to find a place to settle down. Although the strength of many sea beasts was far inferior to Xiaohua's, and Xiaohua was satisfied with the island, it was difficult for Xiaohua to have the idea of forcing them to leave their home. After all, he had escaped far away from home. Putting himself in their shoes, the soft-hearted Xiaohua couldn't be ruthless. Thus, Xiaohua had no choice but to fly towards the east for many days before he finally found a suitable island. This island was not big, only a few kilometers in radius. There were no spirit grasses or spirit trees on it, only clusters of seaweed floating around the island. The entire island was not ordinary, there were no layers of rocks or moist soil. Although the entire island had undulating hills, these hills seemed to be connected. On the hills, the ground between the hills had layers of ripples, as if waves had condensed on it. Xiaohua had been to the Flame Forest Marsh and had seen the flow of magma in the Fire Lake, as well as the appearance of the magma around the Fire Lake. Although he had never seen magma gushing out of QC, he naturally understood the origin of this lava island after thinking about it for a while. Since this lava island had emerged from the bottom of the sea, it must have been born from the Fire Lake at the bottom of the sea. Although the lava was rich in fire attribute world energy, it was not suitable for sea beasts that needed water attribute world energy. Moreover, it was impossible for spirit grasses and other things to grow here, so it seemed that no sea beasts had come to occupy this island. Forget it, here it is. Xiaohua thought about the sea beast he had just encountered. Its body was incomparably huge. It was not afraid of his spiritual sense attack at all. When the wishful staff hit the sea beast's tail, it only let out a roar. Xiaohua's execution spirit Yuan light was still being sacrificially refined and could not be used. Xiaohua also couldn't use other means and could only flee in panic. He had only flown so far and had already encountered such a powerful sea beast. If he continued to fly, he would be courting death. Xiaohua's life was very precious now. If there was nothing special, he would never take too much risk. Immediately, Xiaohua used the earth escape technique to dive into the depths of the island. Sure enough, as Xiaohua thought, the fire attribute world energy in the depths of the island was abundant. Unfortunately, the lava island soil was simply too solid. Xiaohua was unable to go any further after using earth evasion. Xiaohua released his Buddhist perception to take a look. This place was several miles away from the sea surface. Ordinary sea beasts were unlikely to find this place, so they wouldn't be harassed. Especially for this kind of barren island, even if the old farts from the Immortal Music sect and the Immortal Ascension sect came to look for it, they definitely wouldn't care too much. Then, Xiaohua took out the wishful staff and casually chiseled out a space of 10 feet in size. Then he released a few puppets and flew out again. After Xiaohua had finished inspecting the surrounding 10 miles, he flew back. At this time, a simple cave dwelling that was several tens of feet in size had been opened up by the puppet. Anyway, Xiaohua didn't plan to grow flowers and plants in this immortal cave. It was already enough for him to use. There aren't many islands nearby, and the closest one is around 10 kilometers away. Furthermore, the strength of that strange sea beast is only around the middle stage of Foundation establishment. You won't pose any threat to me. Most of the other islands were similar to this one, made of lava. However, they are all extremely small and can't be used. Xiaohua looked around the cave dwelling. He had never been a picky person, so he was very satisfied. He stored the puppet into the space and rubbed his nose as he thought. However, Xiaohua almost jumped up immediately. Damn it, are you kidding me? On the Dawn Rain continent, a Foundation establishment cultivator is a senior, a realm that thousands of aura refining disciples can't reach in their lifetime. However, in the depths of this QC, any random sea beast has the strength of a Foundation establishment cultivator. Do you still want me to live? If there really comes a day when the sea beasts of this QC attack the Dawn Rain continent, even if it's the Cultivation 3 countries, it would be difficult to deal with, right? Moreover, I haven't gone to the depths of the QC yet. Just now, I'm afraid the one that almost stopped me was a gold core cultivator. Doesn't that mean there are even nascent soul cultivators inside? Too scary, too scary. I'd better cultivate honestly. Xiao Hua was very careful. He was especially cautious as he threw out the jade talismans of the capital star array one by one. He looked at the entire array very carefully several times. Then he grabbed with his hand. The entire array flickered with brilliance and covered the cave dwelling. It disappeared without a trace from the lava island. Even so, Xiao Hua was still not at ease. After a while, he came out of the star array again and released his Buddhist consciousness to explore from the outside for a while. Only then did he feel relieved. He turned to look at the misty place in the west and narrowed his eyes. A rare trace of ruthlessness flashed in his eyes. Then, he turned around and rushed into the island. The sun and the moon are like shuttles, weaving all things in the world. Time is like a song, singing all kinds of things in the world. The feather immortal assembly back then was forgotten by others, and the great war of Tao and sword today was still forgotten by others. Even Wu Ming, the nascent soul cultivator who rose rapidly in the great war of Tao and sword, no matter how strange Xiao Hua's background was, no matter whether Xiao Hua was a foundation establishment cultivator or a nascent soul cultivator, no matter whether he was alive or dead, he would be forgotten by others in the end. 100 years was very long, long enough for a mortal to live 2 lives. 100 years was also very short, short enough for an early gold core cultivator to advance to the middle gold core stage. However, 100 years was absolutely important to Xiao Hua. He had never been so calm before. He had never gone into seclusion like this before. He had never actively pursued power like this before. Of course, Xiao Hua's harvest was also great. In the first 10 years, Xiao Hua repaired the damage that the Taoist sect and the Buddhist sect suffered when they passed through the 3 layers of formations, and even converted the true qi cultivated by the Carefree Heart Sutra into the true qi of the Confucian cultivator. In the following 100 years, Xiao Hua worked hard in the Buddhist sect, the Confucian cultivator, and the Taoist sect. As for the Confucian cultivator, Xiao Hua used the secret technique passed down by the Confucian cultivator and integrated the core of Dan into his own boundless righteous qi. His entire middle dantian was filled with crimson righteous qi. Just as Xiao Hua expected, when he used the secret technique to convert true qi, he had already passed the refining essence into qi stage of the Confucian cultivator's cultivation method, and was advancing towards the refining qi into spirit stage. However, what Xiao Hua didn't expect was that after he entered the refining qi into spirit stage, he actually stopped advancing. The core of Dan that should have disappeared didn't completely disappear, and the true qi that he used the secret technique to convert didn't produce the core of Dan that he expected. Of course, Xiao Hua's hard work wasn't in vain. The thumb-sized crimson outline had already been formed, but it lacked the opportunity to condense. Now, the crimson righteous qi was slowly being condensed into the outline of the core of Dan. And the outline of the core of Dan was actually condensed inside Xiao Hua's sword-shaped primordial spirit. It was compatible with the sword intent of the heart sword, just like the sword heart mentioned in the sword cultivator's cultivation method. Sometimes, when Xiao Hua checked the core of Dan, he was really suspicious. That Huan country's sword cultivator should be a branch of the Confucian cultivator. Wasn't that kind of sword intent that pressed forward and destroyed everything indiscriminately the boundless righteous qi stage? But Xiao Hua didn't understand this core of Dan that couldn't be formed, just like the sword heart that hadn't been condensed before. He checked the only art of Dan in his hands, but couldn't figure it out. Fortunately, although he didn't condense the core of Dan, Xiao Hua also made progress in other aspects over the years. For example, Xiao Hua's 9 stars soaring sun flying sword that disappeared. Because of the art of Dan of Confucian cultivators, the sword intent of these 9 flying swords still existed. Later on, it condensed the outline of the core of Dan. Therefore, when Xiao Hua was comprehending the Confucian cultivator's cultivation method, he suddenly had a wonderful idea. He sent a wisp of the Tai green light into the outline of the core of Dan. Later on, Xiao Hua saw that this method was effective. The Tai green light could actually turn into a sword qi and fly out. It was no different from a flying sword. Therefore, he simply refined a wisp of Tai green light from the innate jellyfish and sent it into the outline of the core of Dan, turning it into another wisp of tiny green light. Now, these two wisps of green light were even fiercer than the previous Dream Slayer and Mountain Splitter. Under the control of the two primordial spirit images, they directly had the power of a spirit tool. Xiaohua originally thought that his Confucian cultivator's cultivation method would surpass the Buddhist sect's cultivation method. However, during cultivation, he discovered that his Buddha Saraira's advancement was even smoother than before. Not to mention the daily cultivation of the Exquisite Heart Sutra in the Exquisite Derivation Pagoda, just the premonition of a thunderstorm and sending the Buddha Saraira out of the Great Formation to be struck by lightning also accelerated the growth of the Buddha Saraira extremely quickly. In particular, with the nearly complete Exquisite Heart Sutra, Xiaohua's Buddha Saraira was completely condensed from the beginning. Moreover, every time he completed a layer of cultivation, a lotus would be born on the lotus throne. Before this lotus reached perfection, it would absolutely not allow the Buddha Saraira to enter the next layer of cultivation. Therefore, the cultivation of the Buddhist sect was 10 times more difficult than that of the Confucian cultivators. But even so, Xiaohua still cultivated the Buddha Saraira to a size of 4 qi. In other words, it was the fourth layer of the Exquisite Leaf Sutra. Moreover, the fourth layer of the Exquisite Leaf Sutra began to gradually condense and advance towards the fifth layer. As for the 9 characters mantra, Xiaohua had already comprehended the fourth character in the Buddhist sect's ruins. Until now, he had not made any other breakthroughs. What made Xiaohua feel a little strange was the Buddha fire. Previously, after entering the 3 layers of formation, Xiaohua saw that the situation was not good and transferred everything in his body into the space. The small bucket and other items in the Buddha fire were also the same. However, the Buddha fire itself could not be moved and could only be placed in the Buddha Saraira. However, as the Buddha Saraira was repaired, the Buddha fire was born again. Moreover, according to Xiaohua's observation, not only did the Buddha fire not receive any damage, it became even denser. In particular, the originally invisible golden threads could now be faintly seen. They swayed along with the flickering of the Buddha fire, very dazzling. This Buddha fire was the immeasurable karmic fire, Xiaohua already knew. However, he did not know what the golden threads in the immeasurable karmic fire were. However, he still took out the small bucket and used it on the night of the lightning strike. When not in use, he placed it in the Buddha fire to refine it. Chapter 31:11. Compared to the cultivation of Buddhist and Confucian cultivators, Xiaohua's biggest headache was the cultivation of Taoism. The cultivation of Taoism was originally his specialty, but now, it made it difficult for him to make any progress. Xiaohua's golden core in his lower dantian could no longer be seen. However, because it had experienced the 3 elements lightning tribulation, the 5 elements annihilation great array could not completely erase it. Xiaohua could still sense some traces. After that, Xiaohua's cultivation proved that this golden core could still be reformed. However, after 100 years of cultivation, the golden core still could not be formed. However, it was also wrong to say that it did not form. Xiaohua could clearly sense that the nebula-shaped golden core had different sizes. Moreover, they were all different sizes. Xiaohua could even sense traces of lightning on each golden core. However, his divine sense could not see them. In other words, Xiaohua's current golden core was not only a nebula, it was made up of many golden cores. Moreover, he had refined it into a dark core. A golden core that could not be sensed with divine sense. This kind of golden core, how could it conceive a baby? The jade slip in Xiaohua's hands had never recorded this before. Therefore, even though Xiaohua's cultivation had reached the late stage of golden core, he still did not have any signs of conceiving a baby. The most important thing was that he did not know how to conceive a baby and did not know how to do it. Regarding this, Xiaohua could only describe it as the road to happiness is strewn with setbacks. While smiling bitterly, Xiaohua carefully pondered. According to the strangeness of his golden core, it should be related to the 5 elements annihilation great array. That great array that annihilated all 5 elements. Although it did not destroy Xiaohua's golden core that had undergone the 3 elements lightning tribulation, it still left behind a source of trouble. The golden core could not be formed normally. Also, it was related to Qin Jian's invisible golden thread sword. At that time, Xiaohua was holding this sword. The main body of this sword was also part of the 5 elements. Naturally, it could not escape the Great Array's annihilation. But this flying sword was formless. The material within it might have surpassed the 5 elements and could not be obliterated by the Great Array. And this formless material had been rushed into Xiaohua's dantian by the Great Array, fusing together with the traces of Xiaohua's golden core. This might be the reason why Xiaohua's golden core was formless. In addition to cultivating Buddhism, Taoism, and Confucianism, Xiaohua's blood drop paradise had also made small progress. His blood was originally the bright red of his bloodline, but now it was mixed with strands of devil qi. Within the devil qi, there were countless devil lights. These devil lights were sparkling and translucent, almost condensing into crystal threads. Within these crystal threads, there were also golden threads that divine will could not detect. As for the heavenly man-body infusion technique, heavenly laws embodiment technique, dragon transformation art, and the others, they had also made great progress. However, these improvements were still lacking compared to the main cultivation method that he had been cultivating. Forget it. On this day, Xiaohua came out from his meditation. He stood up impatiently and said in self-mockery, "It seems that I really don't have the fate of being pregnant." After reading these nascent soul cultivation methods, there was no improvement at all. If I don't return to the Dawn Rain continent to find some opportunities, I'm afraid that I can only seek breakthroughs in other areas. However, if I want to refine Buddhism and Confucianism to the spirit-severing stage, it will be extremely difficult. As he spoke, Xiaohua flew out of the capital star formation and rushed to the surface of the Guihe Sea. It was noon, and the scorching sun was overhead, making the entire surface of the water hot. Xiaohua squinted his eyes and looked to the west. His eyes turned and he said in a strange tone, "It's already been 100 years. Why haven't those 2 old monsters come to find me? Could it be that they really think that I have fallen? Or perhaps they have already come, but they didn't discover my capital star formation? Yes, the 2 seals on my body have already been broken. Even if they, damn it." Thinking up to here, Xiaohua slapped his forehead and immediately came to a realization. That's right, since there is no seal, even if the 2 of them come before me again, as long as I use the sky-stealing sun-swapping secret technique, how could they recognize me? However, Xiaohua immediately shook his head. Forget it, I definitely can't take this risk. They are at least spirit-severing stage old monsters. What kind of methods do they have? I will definitely not return to the Dawn Rain continent if I don't have absolute confidence. I can't afford to provoke those 2 old monsters. That old monster not far from me is probably not my opponent now, right? Today, I will go and find him. Xiaohua's gaze moved from the west to the north, and the corners of his mouth revealed a trace of a smile. It turned out that when Xiaohua was in seclusion, he would often come out to find some fun from time to time. Starting from the island closest to him, within a radius of 1,000 li, the sea beasts on hundreds of islands of various sizes were provoked by Xiaohua for no reason. The strength of the sea beasts on these islands was also very different, from foundation establishment to nascent soul. Xiaohua was almost invincible among the sea beasts within 1,000 li. However, 10 years ago, Xiaohua encountered a sea beast with a large body, a strong body, and profound magic power. After 300 rounds of battle, he was no match for it and was chased for several hundred li. In the end, he had to rely on the demon realm's concealment technique to escape. Now that Xiaohua was depressed, wasn't it precisely to find that sea beast to vent his anger? Rumble, a thunderous sound was emitted from Xiaohua's body. Lightning flashed, and Xiaohua's figure streaked across the sky, flying straight towards the north. Wherever the thunderous sound passed, on the large and small islands, many sea beasts withdrew their heads. They originally wanted to come out of their caves, but they also immediately hid back. They originally wanted to release their divine sense, but they also hurriedly retracted it. The thunderous sound in broad daylight was really familiar to them. They knew that the monster, who only fought with them but never used any killing moves. Every time he made a move, his flesh would be torn open. Very quickly, in front of Xiaohua, there was a lush green island. It was perhaps several tens of li in size. There were many huge trees towering on the island, like towers. The branches and leaves of the huge trees were like treasured swords, and at the top of the branches and leaves, there were fruits that were even bigger than a head hanging. Under the huge trees, the entire island was covered with fine, white sea sand. On top of the sea sand, many crabs and other sea creatures were swimming carefreely. It was the image of an immortal island. Compared to Xiaohua's island, it couldn't be mentioned in the same breath. Xiaohua still hadn't flown close when a cold divine sense swept over from the island. Xiaohua also didn't hold back, and similarly released his divine sense. Crackle, crackle, crackle. Like firecrackers, Xiaohua still hadn't seen that sea beast, but he was already fighting with it using his divine sense. Roar, an angry roar that could almost resound several li came from the depths of the island. Obviously, it had suffered a hidden loss from Xiaohua in the battle of divine senses. Soon after, the entire island rumbled, and immediately, a sea beast that was no less than 200 zhang in size flew out from the island. This sea beast was very strange. It had a square shape, and on top of its triangular head, two large eyes emitted a gloomy brilliance. Its square body was orange-red, and fist-sized protrusions were connected to each other all over its body. This sea beast had 4 tentacles. The front 2 were extremely long, more than 10 zhang in length, and the back 2 were slightly shorter. These 4 tentacles were also dark in color. The tentacles were like scissors, several feet long, and when it waved, a cold light flashed. This was the first time Xiaohua saw this sea beast, and he almost thought it was a huge crab. Moreover, this sea beast's shell was very hard. Xiaohua's suppressing cloud seal smashed down, but it couldn't smash the shell. It was very strange. Of course, the strangest thing wasn't this. What puzzled Xiaohua the most was that when this sea beast flew, there was a layer of mist under its body, as if there was a layer of faint mist supporting it. Xiaohua really couldn't understand what kind of flying technique this sea beast was using. Ha, old monster crab. Xiaohua laughed, waved his hand, and took out the 3-feet-long wishful staff and shouted, "This Xiao's weapon has finally been successfully refined. Today, I will let you know this Xiao's methods." Saying that, Xiaohua waved his hand and shouted, "Grow!" The wishful staff really grew to 10 zhang, and after a few more, grow, the entire wishful staff grew to a length of 10 zhang, seemingly not inferior to the sea beast's tentacles. Looking at the wishful staff in his hand, Xiaohua smiled with satisfaction and held the wishful staff. Speaking of refining the wishful staff, it was also beyond Xiaohua's expectations. He thought that the heaven-pacifying staff was extremely easy to refine, and that it would take at most 10 years to refine it. But when he really refined it, he realized the trouble inside. To refine ordinary magic tools and magic treasures, he only needed to quench the impurities in the materials to use it. But the heaven-pacifying staff was different. The 5 elements were the 5 elements, and any other trace could not be integrated into the 5 elements star disk. Therefore, the countless materials in the soul nest were refined by the primordial spirit, transformed green-robed Xiaohua bit by bit using the thunder refining technique. After refining for 100 years, he finally finished refining the materials for the heaven-pacifying staff. Fortunately, Xiaohua had obtained the thunder refining technique. Otherwise, it was really impossible to refine the 5 elements materials so pure. Later, it took more than 10 years to use the blood refining technique to fuse these materials with the 5 elements star disk. Finally, the wishful staff in Xiaohua's hand was also fused into it, refining it into a better wishful staff than the heaven-pacifying staff. In the hands of Xiaohua, the wishful staff could be shrunk to the size of an inch, and the largest could be 10 zhang, with a thickness of a few feet. Although it could not really reach the point of reaching the heavens, Xiaohua was happy to scratch his ears and cheeks. Today, Xiaohua dared to provoke the sea beast again because of the success of the wishful staff. Roar! Seeing Xiaohua waving the wishful staff, the sea beast roared and waved the 2 tentacles in front of its head. Kacha kacha, sounds came from the tentacles and hit Xiao Hua's wishful staff. With a loud ka sound, the wishful staff hit one of the sea beast's tentacles, and several sparks were produced. The sea beast's figure retreated a few feet. Looking at the tentacle that was hit, there were some cracks in front of it like a flying sword. The sea beast spat out a breath of clear air, which fell on the tentacle, but the cracks quickly healed. Chapter 31:12. Oh! Xiao Hua was also stunned when he saw this. He laughed and said, "It turns out that the old monster Xia also has a secret technique. However, today is different from the last time. This Xiao will let you see this Xiao's secret technique again." As he spoke, his body trembled. Grow! Following this mantra, a ball of golden light appeared around Xiao Hua's body. Then a whirlwind appeared, and countless water-type spiritual energy of heaven and earth rushed into Xiao Hua's body along with the heavenly law's embodiment technique. Very quickly, a 30-meter-tall Dharma idol appeared in front of the sea beast along with Xiao Hua's body. The sea beast didn't seem to understand what Xiao Hua was doing. When the Dharma idol appeared, the sea beast suddenly woke up, roared, and rushed toward Xiao Hua without fear. "Grow!" Xiao Hua shouted again. The thickness of the wishful steel staff was a few feet long, and it was held in the hands of Fa Xiang. Wu, the sound of the wind whistling came from the head of the staff. Boom! There was a loud noise, and it hit the tentacles of the sea beast with great accuracy. As Xiao Hua's staff fell, the tentacles of the sea beast immediately turned into powder, and a mass of water-blue blood sprayed out and scattered in the sea breeze. Moreover, the huge body of the sea beast was also repelled by the staff. Xiao Hua laughed, "Eat this Xiao's staff again." Immediately, Xiao Hua's staff avoided the water-blue brilliance on the tentacles of the sea beast and hit the body of the sea beast. Boom! There was another loud bang, and a water-blue brilliance was born from the head of the staff. Unfortunately, this brilliance was instantly shattered by the staff. Similarly, after the brilliance, there was a kacha sound. The previous defense that could not be broken by the seal of turning the sea was like a clay sculpture under the heavy blow of the staff, and cracks immediately appeared. Xiao Hua had no doubt that as long as he added another strike, the body of the sea beast would definitely be smashed into powder, just like the tentacles of the sea beast just now. But at this moment, Xiao Hua had just raised the staff, and a slight roar was born from the sea beast's body. A watery brilliance followed the sea beast as it opened its mouth. In an instant, it surrounded an area of several dozen feet. Xiao Hua's magic power was immediately confined, and even his divine sense was forced back into his Naiwan palace. Not only that, but Xiao Hua's Dharma idol flashed with brilliance and quickly shrank back into his body. Even the wishful steel staff fell into his hand and turned into a 3-foot size. It was as if Xiao Hua's spiritual power was insufficient and he was forced to defend himself. However, just as the sea beast opened its mouth and extended its sword-like tongue toward Xiao Hua's forehead, Xiao Hua sneered and opened his mouth. Primordial unity azure light flew out, streaking through the air like a waterfall. Crack, crack. Several crisp sounds rang out. In the blink of an eye, the tiny azure light rolled several times around Xiao Hua, and the space sealed by the sea beast was immediately shattered. The sea beast was so scared that it hurriedly retracted its tongue. Xiao Hua laughed and threatened with the wishful steel staff in his hand. "Old monster crab, eat this Xiao's staff again." Poof! Not waiting for Xiao Hua to raise the wishful staff, the sea beast hurriedly opened its mouth again, and a dazzling brilliance emerged from there, and a water-blue bead flew out of the sea beast's mouth. This bead was not round but square. The brilliance around the bead was also condensed, and its shape was very similar to the sea beast's. With the appearance of the bead, an aura that swept across several miles was born from the bead, firmly covering Xiao Hua. This aura was terrifying, wild, and bloodthirsty. 2 thin crystal threads shot out from the eyes of the sea beast on the bead and pierced toward Xiao Hua. With a crack, the tiny azure light immediately cut the crystal threads. Unfortunately, the crystal threads flickered and the tiny azure light cut through nothing. Amazing! Xiao Hua's expression did not change as he praised. Then, with a wave of his hand, a sword gourd appeared in his hand. Quick! Xiaohua pointed his finger and a faint gray color appeared from the sword gourd. This gray color seemed to have a nose and eyes, but now it was too blurry and could not be seen clearly. However, with the appearance of the gray color, the unclear mouth and nose faced the sea beast. The sea beast's speed immediately stopped in midair and even the crystal threads were instantly retracted. At the same time as the crystal threads were retracted, one green and one red sword light flew out and landed on the sea beast's neck. Of course, it only landed on the bead, not on the bead. Hee, this three-legged golden crow's soul essence is really powerful. It can even nail the soul essence of this sea beast. Xiaohua looked at the sword gourd in his hand and the sword light that landed on the sea beast's neck and smiled proudly. This sword gourd was naturally the execution spirit yuan light that was refined into the three-legged golden crow's soul essence. Return. Xiaohua knew that this sea beast's cultivation was not easy. Unless it was absolutely necessary or he needed this sea beast to refine some magic treasure, Xiaohua would not easily make a move. Along with Xiaohua's incantation, the gray color on the sword gourd entered the sword gourd and the two sword lights also flew back from the sea beast's neck and were about to enter the sword gourd. But right at this moment, a Piu suddenly occurred. The oceanic beast's aqua blue pearl suddenly opened its mouth, and a watery brilliance sprayed out, and instantly landed in front of Xiaohua. Damn it! Xiaohua did not know whether to laugh or cry. He knew that this sea beast could not distinguish right from wrong and did not know that he was being lenient. Now that it had a chance to live, it immediately counterattacked. Fortunately, Xiaohua's execution spirit yuan light was in midair. Xiaohua did not use any other magic and pointed his finger. Shua shua! The two sword lights landed on the brilliance. He thought that the execution spirit yuan light would definitely be able to scatter the brilliance. However, what was even more out of Xiaohua's expectations was that when the execution spirit yuan light landed on the brilliance, it was as if it was stuck. It was simply unable to cut it. When the brilliance arrived in front of Xiaohua, an extremely strange sweet fragrance mixed with the smell of meat rushed into Xiaohua's mouth and nose. Xiaohua's mind sank. It was as if endless illusions rushed into his mind. Xiaohua was greatly shocked. He did not dare to be negligent and hastily used the God Guidance secret technique. At the same time, he felt his mind become clear. A burst of ear-piercing sizzling sound was heard. It turned out that at this moment, the watery brilliance had already eroded Xiaohua's protective golden light. It actually destroyed a lot of Xiaohua's Taoist robe. At the same time, Xiaohua's faintly pale golden skin was exposed under the Taoist robe. This watery brilliance is actually so powerful. Xiaohua felt a numbing pain on the surface of his skin, as if it was being bitten by ants. He could not help but be slightly astonished. He was clear in his heart that in the past 100 years, when he used the heavenly thunder of the heavenly sea to temper the Buddha's Saraira, he also used the celestial body strengthening technique to temper his physical body. Right now, his physical body was perhaps several times stronger than before. This sea beast's innate divine ability was really powerful. Roar! Seeing that the brilliance had already succeeded, the sea beast roared again. The blue pearl flashed again and spat out several more brilliances. This brilliance was even faster than before. Forget it, Xiaohua originally wanted to check his own cultivation. Seeing that the sea beast had spat out these brilliances and that the blue color on the pearl had weakened, he knew that it was about to go all out. He really did not have any reason to take the sea beast's life. With a thought, lightning flashed around his body and forced the blue brilliance away. His figure soared into the sky. With a splash, he crashed into the heavenly sea. Roar! The sea beast was actually happy. The floating cloud under its body moved and chased after Xiaohua. Naturally, the blue pearl also entered its mouth. However, when the sea beast reached the edge of the island, it stopped again. A sea beast that could cultivate to nearly nascent soul strength. Although it had not transformed, it already had intelligence. How could it really chase after him? Woo! A clear sound came from the sea beast's mouth. A several zhang thick beam of light then rushed out from the sea beast's mouth and landed on the heavenly sea. A dense water-based spiritual energy of heaven and earth was born from the beam of light and fell into the sea beast's stomach. The previously dim pearl gradually recovered its luster. Sigh, this soul execution vital light. At this moment, Xiaohua was using the water avoidance art to travel in the heavenly sea. In his hands were two flying swords of the soul execution vital light. At this moment, the flying swords could no longer be called flying swords. They were two sparkling and translucent jade-like objects. They jumped around in Xiaohua's hands as if they had intelligence. Xiaohua's gaze fell on the two flashing brilliances and he could not help but sigh. They can already be used as spirit artifacts. It's a pity that they are not too sharp. They are somewhat inferior to the Tai green light. However, this Tai green light is part of the 5 elements and cannot be refined into the soul execution vital lights yin and yang. In the future, I still need to find the magnetic aurora. After retrieving the soul execution vital light, Xiaohua looked at the jade-green seabed. Countless large and small fishes swam around leisurely. His heart moved. That's not right. This old monster Xie should already have the strength of a Yuaning. In the Dawn Rain continent, it is a master of an area. If we were to talk about it, even if it is not an 8th grade monster, it should be a 7th grade monster, right? Why is it still unable to transform? If this old monster Xie transformed, what would it look like? I understand. Xiaohua laughed as he thought. Suddenly he realized. This old monster Xie is actually not a 7th grade monster. Perhaps it is only a 6th grade or even a 5th grade monster. However, it is not an ordinary sea beast. It has a powerful body. What is special is that in this heavenly sea, it can fight with other sea beasts. In addition, the water-based spiritual energy of heaven and earth in the heavenly sea is very dense. This is where the sea beasts can use their divine abilities. Therefore, even though the old monster Xie's cultivation is low, its strength is outstanding. At the very least, it far surpasses the ordinary cultivators of the Dawn Rain continent. This is the reason why it is commonly said that overseas cultivators are more powerful than Dawn Rain continent cultivators. In that case, this Xiao can also be considered as an overseas cultivator, right? Xiaohua chuckled. He slightly raised his head and his gaze landed on a string of bubbles in the distance. I'm afraid it is the corpses of some sea beasts. Under the bubbles, a large lump of black things slowly floated up. Xiaohua took a look and flew over. There are many sea beasts in this heavenly sea. They would often fight for islands and other reasons. Even though Xiaohua did not deliberately attack and kill these sea beasts, the number of sea beasts' corpses he picked up in the vicinity was extremely large. Chapter 31:13. Although the monster cores in these sea beasts' corpses are gone, their bodies are extremely tough. Whether it's their tentacles, claws, etc., even their shells are the best materials for refining magic tools. How can Xiaohua not take them when he sees them? Therefore, when he sees something appear again, he goes over very naturally. However, when he reaches the thing floating in front of him, Xiaohua frowns again. He sees that it's a few corpses connected together. The corpses no longer have flesh, only fragments of skeletons are left. Even the skeletons have shrunk into a few short joints, as if the corpses were burned by waves of fire. Outside the corpses, there are some damaged armors. Most of the armors are greenish-black in color. There are also condensed beads of different sizes on the surface of the armors, like a layer of greenish-black pearls. From the looks of the armors, it's very obvious that these corpses should be cultivators. However, what puzzles Xiaohua is that these skeletons are very thick, far beyond Xiaohua's understanding. Xiaohua makes a rough estimate. They should be 2 to 3 times stronger than ordinary cultivators. What's going on here? Xiaohua sees that the armors are already damaged. There's no possibility of refining anymore. He doesn't move forward, only looking at those strange skeletons in a daze. Oh, Xiaohua takes another look. On one of the skeleton's joints, there's a thumb-sized semicircular ring. It's a storage ring. Xiaohua understands. His eyes brighten, he grabs the semicircular ring and it falls into his hand. Sure enough, when his divine sense enters it, there's a small space that's about to collapse inside. Inside this space, there's a strange thumb-sized thing floating. Xiaohua takes that thing out. Seeing that the corpses have already passed over his head and floated to the surface of QC, he sighs and throws that already burned storage ring into QC. The thing in Xiaohua's hand looks black, but there are bits of gold inlaid inside, like bits of gold light in the dark night. Although this thing is thumb-sized, it's not light. However, when Xiaohua's divine sense sweeps over it, he can't see anything strange about it. Truly strange. Xiaohua weighed the thing in his hand. The overseas cultivators are indeed different from Dawn Rain Continent. These things should be used by the Scorching Sun Island, the Icicle Island, the Gales Island, and the Yensen Island, which Hua Heng mentioned. Unfortunately, apart from a token and a saraira with a Buddha statue on it, Xiaohua didn't obtain any secret techniques from the storage bag and storage ring, so he didn't know how to examine them. Let's cultivate first. Xiaohua thought for a moment and suppressed the idea of going to the 4 islands. The 2 spirit-severing stage-old monsters will definitely place their disciples in the 4 islands. I haven't cultivated to the nascent soul stage, so I can't be sure of victory. I definitely won't appear. Right? Didn't he obtain many body mutilation secret techniques in Inkcloud Dark Forest? Now that the primordial spirit of the green-robed man was no longer refining the sky-leveling staff, it was better for him to read more about those secret arts. Who knows, he might be able to find something. Moreover, this Xiao's Buddha Saraira has already reached 4 feet. It's time for me to cultivate this Buddhist sect's Heaven's Eye to the 4th level. Hehe, speaking of this, the Ardent Fire Mountain secret techniques are really useful. Although this Heaven's Eye is a Buddhist sect's magical ability, with the help of the secret techniques and Inkcloud's brain, the advancement is equally miraculous. If I can cultivate this Heaven's Eye to the 9th level, I'm afraid I can really see the 9 heavens and the 9 underworlds. Soon after, Xiaohua flew to another place and found a few powerful sea beasts within 1,000 miles to fight a few times. Moreover, he casually found some things in the nearby sea. Soon, he returned to the cave and began to cultivate in seclusion again. Several years passed quickly. On this day, the wind was calm and the waves were calm. The sun had just risen above the sea. Countless seabirds spread their wings and soared between the sea and the sky. On the rippling sea surface, there were also tens of thousands of sea fish swimming. From time to time, there would be pillars of water soaring to the sky in the distance. At the same time, the faint roar of sea beasts would follow. It seemed that this day was no different from an ordinary day in 10,000 years. A clear cry sounded. From the northern horizon, a speck of 5 colors appeared. When it got closer, it was a several zhang large rainbow luan. One could see the rainbow luan spreading its 5-colored wings. With a clear cry, it split the sky and immediately flew more than 10 li. The 2 long tail feathers on the rainbow luan's tail slightly trembled. It was very eye-catching in the fierce wind that rolled up behind the rainbow luan. On the rainbow luan's back sat a woman. This woman looked to be around 30 years old. She looked very dignified. The woman had a pair of bright eyes that seemed to be able to see through the various states of the world. However, at this moment, her eyes were lowered to look at the misty sea surface. She was faintly anxious. The strangest thing was that this woman wasn't wearing an ordinary Taoist robe. Instead, it was a crescent moon white robe. This robe was very simple and didn't have any colored thread. What was special about this woman was that she even wore a strange hat on her head. Between the hat and her ears, there wasn't a single strand of black hair. Stop, the woman suddenly opened her mouth. Her pearly white teeth were slightly exposed. Her words were also different from the common speech of the Dawn Rain Continent. The rainbow luan was very intelligent. Its fluttering wings immediately retracted. At the rainbow luan's belly feathers, a 5-colored cloud appeared and supported the rainbow luan. The several zhang large rainbow luan and the strange woman stopped in midair. The woman stood up from the rainbow luan. Her brows were still slightly furrowed. She raised her leg and stood in midair. A faint cloud of mist appeared under the woman's feet. This woman was actually barefoot. Her sparkling and translucent jade-like ankles looked very soft and smooth, emitting a faint brilliance. As she stepped on the cloud of mist, an indescribable elegance was born from it. The woman stood on the cloud and lowered her head to look at the vibrant sea surface. Then, she frowned slightly and actually closed her eyes. However, the woman's ears on both sides emitted a faint luster. This luster flickered slightly, as if the woman was using a divine ability. After a long time, the woman's ears moved. She raised her eyebrows and her brows relaxed. However, when the woman opened her eyes, the luster on her ears had disappeared. The woman stretched out her hand again and took out a small jade slip from her bosom. She glanced at it and a smile appeared on her face. She seemed to be muttering to herself, "Amitba, this West Sea is really too far away. This so-called island is densely covered in stars. Who can tell which one is which? Su Tanyue is really good at scheming. He actually found this place." As the woman spoke, she raised her leg and sat on the rainbow luan's back. She gently patted the rainbow luan's back. The rainbow luan let out a clear cry and flapped its wings. The wind surged and the clouds moved as it flew into the distance. The woman's voice lingered in the air. "Although this place is far west, it doesn't look extremely desolate. Could it be that place?" The woman flew thousands of kilometers to the west and stopped several times. However, she didn't get off the rainbow luan. Instead, her ears emitted light again and she adjusted her directions several times. In the end, the woman stopped near the lava island where Xiaohua cultivated. "Yes, it should be here." The woman finally took out the jade slip and checked it before getting off the rainbow luan's back. She stepped on the clouds and stopped in midair. The rainbow luan spread its wings and flew around the woman. At this time, the clouds were scattered and light mist was gushing out. The afterglow of the setting sun scattered everywhere. Not only were the clouds gorgeous and the light mist faintly discernible, but even the rainbow luan's feathers reflected the orange sun and looked extremely poignant. The woman looked at all of this with a slight smile. Her eyes flickered as if she was a little obsessed. Roar! In just the time it took to drink a cup of tea, there was another roar. However, after this roar, there were roars and hisses frequently. Bursts of explosions and rumbles also followed. The originally calm scenery was completely destroyed. Not only was the rainbow luan's flight a little weak, but the woman's faint smile also disappeared. There was a trace of displeasure in her eyes. Just as this displeasure appeared, whoosh! On the surface of the sea to the south, a wave of several dozen feet was set off. The wave dispersed the mist and rushed to the bottom of the woman's body with strands of blood. Boom! There was a loud sound that soared into the sky. The waves seemed to be boiling as they surged up. One by one, a several dozen feet tall human figure suddenly appeared from the waves. Ah! The moment the human figure appeared, it immediately let out a roar towards the sky. A formless sound wave quickly spread out. When the rainbow luan, who had already stopped flying, heard this sound, its wings couldn't help but tremble. Its body also quickly shrank. When the woman saw this, she coldly snorted. Her body emitted a faint brilliance that covered the rainbow luan. The rainbow luan landed in front of the woman. The woman shook her sleeve and the rainbow luan flew into it and disappeared. Looking at the human figure again, it had already stopped in midair. The waves that surrounded the human figure had already fallen, creating a splash of water that was several dozen feet tall. It gradually disappeared. Looking at the human figure again, it wasn't a real person. Aside from the khaki-colored armor on its body, its strong limbs were very similar to a human's, but its head was a hairy leopard's head. This leopard's head was very ferocious. The khaki-colored pupils in its bell-like eyes flashed with bloodlust. Leopard stripes streaked across the mane on its face. A few strands of blood still flowed from its bloody mouth. It had clearly just eaten something raw. In the left claw of the leopard-headed human figure, there was also a sea beast tentacle that was stained with blood. In the right claw, there was a thumb-sized demon core that was releasing a water-blue brilliance. The leopard-headed human figure's ferocious gaze swept past the woman. There was a flash of surprise in its eyes. It opened its bloody mouth and unexpectedly spoke. "Little girl, are you the immortal friend that Sue Swansea invited?" The woman indifferently glanced at the leopard-headed human figure and coldly snorted. She didn't answer. "Roar, I'm asking you a question." The leopard-headed human figure suddenly opened its bloody mouth. A strong stench rushed out and rushed toward the woman. "You're courting death." The woman clearly looked down on the leopard-headed humanoid and did not bother to reply. Seeing the leopard-headed humanoid being so rude, the woman coldly snorted and pointed her finger. A huge fireball flew out from the air and exploded between the two with a bang. It was precisely the leopard-headed humanoid's breath that was incinerated. Moreover, dozens of sparks flew out from the fireball and split into 3 different directions, rushing towards the leopard-headed humanoid. Chapter 31:14. The leopard-headed humanoid squinted his eyes and waved his claws. The tentacles and monster core of the sea beast disappeared at the same time. Then he waved his right claw in the air and a yellow brilliance appeared. It turned into a dozen plumes of smoke and dust that rushed into the sparks. Boom, boom, boom. After a series of muffled sounds, the sparks disappeared and the smoke and dust slowly dispersed. The woman raised her eyebrows and seemed a little surprised. Then she raised her jade-like hand slightly and a golden cauldron the size of a fist appeared. As soon as the small cauldron appeared, the space within a foot of it distorted rapidly. It was as if the temperature of the small cauldron was so high that it was about to melt the space. The space-splitting cauldron? You're Ching-Chin from the Great Snow Mountain. The leopard-headed humanoid was slightly stunned when he saw the small cauldron. He could not help but exclaim in surprise. "Yes, it's me." The woman heard him and replied proudly, "If you're afraid, tell me your name immediately and let me see where you're from. If you're related, I'll let you off for the sake of Su Zhuoyang. Otherwise, what can you do?" The leopard-headed humanoid sneered. He opened his mouth and a square box the size of a thumb flew out. The box was square and did not look special. However, when the leopard-headed humanoid breathed a mouthful of demonic aura on it, a reddish-yellow brilliance rushed into the air and a mountain peak a few feet high appeared in the brilliance. The magnificent mountain box? How did you get this treasure? Seeing this, Master Ching-Chen's expression changed and his hand that was controlling the space-splitting cauldron slowed down. "This treasure was originally mine. Where did I get it from?" The leopard-headed humanoid sneered. "Although your space-splitting cauldron is powerful, it can't do anything to my magnificent mountain box. Do you still dare to fight with me?" "Why wouldn't I dare? I'd like to see, what ability do you have to control the magnificent mountain box?" Master Ching-Chin sneered. He lifted his hand and a tricolored flame rushed out from the space-splitting cauldron. "Don't worry, my 2 fellow immortals." At this moment, a loud voice came from afar. When Master Ching-Chin heard this, he bent the middle finger of his right hand and flicked it gently. The 3-foot-long fire dragon that had flown out of the cracked void cauldron returned to the small cauldron. When she looked up, she saw a golden sword light flying toward them from the eastern horizon like a meteor. In just a moment, a middle-aged man with thick eyebrows and big eyes dressed in a scholar's robe appeared in front of them on a flying sword. The leopard-headed man also snorted coldly. He opened his mouth again and spat out a mouthful of demonic energy. The so-called magnificent mountain box shrank back to the size of a thumb and fell into his mouth. "It's all my fault." As soon as the middle-aged man landed, he immediately cupped his fists and said with a smile, "Because this treasure hunt in the West Sea is too important, I didn't dare to neglect it. Therefore, other than this one's name, this one did not reveal the names of the others. My apologies for causing a misunderstanding between the two of you." "It doesn't matter." Master Ching-Chin smiled faintly and said, "Su Tanyue has already made this clear. You don't have to apologize now." "To Swansea." The leopard-headed man opened his mouth and shouted, "I know you have a wide range of friends, but I still underestimated you. The little beauty of the Great Snow Mountain was not someone ordinary people could meet. You actually invited her here. Your relationship is definitely not ordinary." This middle-aged man was Su Zhuoyang, whom Master Qing Chen had mentioned. However, when Su Zhuoyang heard this, his expression did not change at all. He glanced at the leopard-headed man indifferently and said with a smile, "Leopard Immortal, you are frank and outspoken. You say whatever is on your mind. You are much better than ordinary people with dirty thoughts. However, I still have to disappoint Leopard Jinren. Among the treasures of the West Sea, there's something that Master Pure Dust wants. Therefore, although I'm only acquainted with the Dharmakaya, once I asked for your help, you immediately agreed." "Haha, I don't believe it." The leopard-headed humanoid named Leopard Spiritual Master laughed. But at this moment, the sound of a crane's cry came from the distant horizon. Su Zhuoyang and the others looked up and saw a faint white spot on the sea surface in the northeast, which was already somewhat dark. "Good." Su Zhuoyang clapped his hands and said with a smile, "The other two are also here." However, when the white spot flew closer, it was revealed that there was an old man sitting cross-legged on the back of a white crane that was several feet in size. The old man was dressed in a linen robe. His forehead was very wide, his eyes were very bright, and his white hair was fluttering like snow. When the old man floated down from the back of the white crane, a white cloud immediately appeared under his feet. Coupled with the emerald cane in his hand, he really looked like an immortal descending to the mortal world. The white crane, like Master Qing Chen's rainbow phoenix, sensed Leopard Immortal's breath from far away and flew very hesitantly. The old man also flicked his big sleeve and kept the white crane in it. Then, he flew over and looked at the three people. He cupped his hands and said with a smile, "I greet you all." Su Zhuoyang heard that the old man not only did not report his name, but also frowned slightly with a complicated expression on his face. After returning the greeting, he whispered, "What's wrong? That person can't come?" "Alas, yes." The old man sighed. "Man proposes, God disposes. That person has already agreed. I was waiting at the foot of the mountain, but before I left, there was an important matter that he had to attend to. Brother Su, I have failed you." It's okay." Su Zhuoyang's brows relaxed and he said with a smile, "It's best that we have Zen Master Liao Kong. Without him, we can still enter." "Zen Master Liao Kong?" Master Qing Chen was surprised and asked, "Are you talking about Zen Master Liao Kong of Huanglian Temple?" Su Zhuoyang said with a bitter smile, "Isn't it Zen Master Liao Kong, who is proficient in Buddhist arrays? With his help, we are naturally not afraid of the arrays of the West Sea relic. Therefore, although I am not very familiar with Zen Master Liao Kong, I especially entrusted Brother Chu." "Alas, Zen Master Liao Kong definitely can't come at this time." Master Qing Chen sighed. "The Feast of All Souls at Dong and Zen Temple is about to open. He is going to preach." Hearing this, Su Zhuoyang laughed again. "Since Zen Master Liao Kong is not coming, then he won't come. This is God's will. Since we are here, we naturally have our fate. Let me introduce you. This is Brother Chu Muhuan of the Chu family in the hidden immortal continent." Then, Su Zhuoyang raised his hand and pointed at the old man. When the old man heard Su Zhuoyang mention Zen Master Liao Kong's name, he knew that he would not return empty-handed this time. He also smiled and cupped his hands. "I am Chu Muhuan. Greetings to the two fellow immortals. I am Qing Chen from the Great Snow Mountain in the Pure Land world. Greetings to Chu Tanyue." Master Qing Chen put her palms together and bowed to return the greeting. "I am Leopard Spiritual Master from the Flat Forest Mountain in the Thousand Demons Sacred Realm." Leopard Spiritual Master raised his two claws casually and cupped his hands casually to salute. Seeing that the three people had finished their greetings, Su Zhuoyang said with a smile, "Since everyone is familiar with each other, we will be in the same boat in the following time. This West Sea relic is really famous. I have heard about it for many years, but I never thought that one day I would personally come to explore the true face of this treasure. Especially with the help of the fellow immortals, I will definitely return with a full load this time." Su Swansea. Leopard Spiritual Master was dissatisfied. "We have already introduced ourselves. Why don't you say anything? Although we all know you, this is the basic etiquette of the hidden immortal continent, right?" Of course. Su Zhuoyang patted his forehead and said with a bitter smile, I really neglected it. Thank you for your reminder, fellow immortal leopard. Then, Su Zhuoyang cupped his hands and bowed. I am Su Zhuoyang, a disciple of the hidden immortal continent's Fecta sect. I am not proficient in the 6 arts, but I like the art of divination. Thus, I won the title of Divine Diviner. I am not talented, so I am ashamed. That's right. Leopard Spiritual Master also cupped his hands and returned the salute. Your hidden immortal continent is known as the origin of etiquette. If you don't remember this basic etiquette in your heart, who would be convinced? Fellow immortal leopard, you are wrong. Su Zhuoyang stood up and said seriously, my hidden immortal continent is the inheritance of Confucian cultivators, which emphasizes on the contention of 100 schools of thought. I naturally don't know who would belittle the 1,000 demons' sacred realm. But I know that my Fecta sect never asks about one's background. Otherwise, I would not be able to make friends with fellow immortals. Hee, of course I'm not talking about you. Leopard Spiritual Master laughed. I can come here because of your face. If it was someone else. Leopard Spiritual Master glanced at Master Qing Chen, who was not far away. At this time, Master Qing Chen had recovered his solemn appearance. He looked straight ahead as if he did not hear what Leopard Spiritual Master said. Su Zhuoyang smiled in his heart. He knew what Leopard Spiritual Master meant, but he could not say a word about this matter. Brother Su, Chu Muhuan seized the opportunity to ask, if Zen Master Liao Kong does not come, how can we break the array? Where is the West Sea relic in the West Sea? At this time, you should tell us the location. We can consult together and work together to make sure nothing goes wrong. Hearing Chu Muhuan mention the West Sea relic, Leopard Spiritual Master's eyes lit up. His withered yellow eyes no longer looked at Master Qing Chen, but stared at Su Zhuoyang. Yes, Brother Chu is right. Su Zhuoyang nodded and explained, this is the time to discuss it. However, although I am the initiator of this treasure hunt, I am not the only one. What? There are other people? Chu Muhuan was stunned and frowned. Brother Su, why didn't you say this earlier? I can come to the West Sea, because I value your integrity. If it was someone else who initiated it, I wouldn't dare to believe it. Chapter 31:15. Brother Chu, please don't worry. Su Zhuoyang smiled bitterly. He looked at Chu Muhuan, then at Leopard Taoist Master and Master Qing Chen, and explained patiently, this person's identity is a bit special. Before I see him, I can't reveal his identity. Of course, you 3 should rest assured. That person's friendship with me is not inferior to yours. If I didn't trust him, I would never have come to the West Sea. Su Zhuoyang turned his hand over, and a thumb-sized black object appeared in his hand. He said, that person has already given this to me. After I checked it, I found that the information recorded in it is detailed and true. It doesn't seem to be fake. Can I take a look at it? Chu Muhuan's brows did not relax as he asked. Of course. Su Zhuoyang did not hesitate. He raised his hand, and the black object flew out. Chu Muhuan grabbed it and it fell into his hand. Then, Chu Muhuan raised his hand and was about to place it on his forehead when Su Zhuoyang hurriedly shouted, Brother Chu, this object can't be seen with divine sense. You need to use eye-clearing magic. So strange? Although Chu Muhuan was surprised, there was a hint of joy in his eyes. Then, Chu Muhuan placed his hand in front of Su Zhuoyang's eyes. His eyes flickered with a faint green light. After the time it took to brew a cup of tea, he finally withdrew it. After he closed his eyes for a moment, he raised his hand and the item flew back into Su Zhuoyang's hand. How is it? Leopard Taoist Master could not help but ask. It's true. Chu Muhuan replied calmly, if you don't believe me, you can check it yourself. If I could see it, would I still need to ask? Leopard Taoist Master laughed. I don't have as many magic skills as you. I'll take a look. Master Qing Chen stretched out her hand, and a jade-like hand came out of her sleeve. Leopard Taoist Master's withered yellow eyes could not help but glance at the delicate wrist. Master, please? Su Zhuoyang handed the object to Master Qing Chen and said with a smile, however, I must remind you that this object can't be seen with Buddhist sense. Master Ching-Chen smiled, took the item, and said, since the divine perception technique of the Confucian school can't be used, the Buddhist perception of the Buddhist sect won't work either. Master Ching-Chen took the object and did not use any magical power. Instead, she looked it up and down with her beautiful eyes. After a while, she nodded and said, this is the ink cloud pupil used in ancient records. It has long been lost. Not to mention any recorded method, even the materials were nowhere to be found. This poor nun has seen the image of this item in a pile of old papers. As he spoke, Wizard Ching-Chen raised Mo Yuntong. However, he did not place it on his forehead. Instead, he placed it next to his ear. A faint light flashed in Master Ching-Chen's ears and slowly covered Mo Yuntong. I thought that the heavenly ear connection could only be used for hearing. After practicing the heavenly ear connection, one could hear things from 100 miles, 1,000 miles, or even 10,000 miles away. Who would have thought that the heavenly ear connection could be used in this way? Su Tanyue doesn't practice Buddhism, so he doesn't know about the Buddhist magic. Master Ching-Chen opened his eyes and said lightly, how can the heavenly ear connection of the Buddhist sect be so shallow? After practicing the heavenly ear connection, one can not only hear everything, including the sound of heaven, the sound of human beings, and the sound of the three evils, but also recognize the 3,000 macro worlds according to the sound. He can attain the Buddha fruit. Yes, the Buddhist magic is indeed extraordinary. Immortal Leopard nodded vigorously. I never thought that in the Buddhist sect, one could use their ears to judge people. Then why do we need eyes? Of course, we need to use our eyes to see people's hearts. Master Ching-Chen said in a cold tone. She took the ink cloud pupil from her ear and handed it to Su Zhuoyang. She said, the content inside should be consistent with what Su Tanyue said. I also believe in Su Tanyue. Good. Su Zhuoyang took the ink cloud pupil and carefully put it away. He said with a smile, thank you for your trust. However, he immediately raised his eyes to look at the dark sea and said, this is not the place that person invited us to. We still have to hurry and get there before dawn. Who is this person? Immortal Leopard was unhappy. I came from the Holy Land and spent a lot of time. It's fine that he didn't meet us here, but why didn't he wait for us here? Su Zhuoyang smiled faintly, his eyes flashing with a silver-white brilliance. He looked around and said with great confidence, Leopard immortal friend, as long as you see that person, you will definitely not say such words again. That person has a good reason for not coming. With that, Su Zhuoyang looked up at a direction in the distance. His silver-white eyes were particularly eye-catching in the night. A golden sword light appeared under his feet, and he was about to soar into the sky. Let's go. I'll lead the way. It won't take more than 6 hours. Speaking of this, Su Zhuoyang naturally looked back and glanced at the three people. At the same time, his eyes swept over the lava island under their feet. Let's go. Immortal Leopard roared around him. He stepped on the wind and flew more than 100 feet away. Seeing that Immortal Leopard had left, Master Ching-Chen and Chu Muhuan waved their sleeves. The colorful Yuan and the cloud crane flew out. The two birds stretched their wings in the air, but none of them dared to make a loud sound. Just as they were about to step on their mounts, Su Zhuoyang suddenly said hurriedly, wait. Su Xuanzi, what's the matter? Immortal Leopard asked unhappily as the wind stopped. Immortal Leopard, Master Ching-Chen, the silver-white color in Su Zhuoyang's eyes had disappeared. It was replaced by a kind of astonishment. Who arrived here first? It's me. Master Ching-Chen's face also showed a strange expression. She followed Su Zhuoyang's gaze and looked at the lava island under their feet. This place. I've already checked it. There's nothing wrong. Could it be that Su Tanyue found something? It's really interesting. Su Zhuoyang's face showed a thoughtful expression. I didn't expect to meet an overseas cultivator in the depths of the West Sea. And the magic array outside the cultivator's cave is also strange. It seems to be very powerful. If my 1,000 eyes hadn't just improved, I'm afraid I wouldn't have discovered the strangeness inside. When Master Ching Chen heard this, her face changed slightly and became a little hot. She didn't expect that there was an overseas cultivator hiding under the feet of the four of them. It was especially hidden from her heavenly ears, but it was discovered by Su Zhuoyang's 1,000 eyes. She wanted to activate her heavenly ears again, but after thinking for a while, she gave up the idea. Since she couldn't find it just now, what was the use of finding it now? So this is? When Chu Muhuan heard what Su Zhuoyang said, he had already displayed his magical power. His eyes were faintly clear like water. After looking for a while, he couldn't help but cry out in amazement, "Brother Su's 1,000 eyes is really powerful. If you hadn't reminded me, I wouldn't have been able to find the strangeness of this magic array even if I looked at it 10 times. This magic array seems to... After listening to Chu Muhuan's words, Master Ching Chen's face became less awkward, but she was also very surprised. She asked, "Chu Tanyue, what does this magic array seem to be?" Chu Muhuan smiled bitterly and shook his head slightly. "This magic array is hidden in the void. I can only see a little bit with my magical power. It seems to be similar to a legendary ancient magic array, but I can't remember what kind of magic array it is at the moment." "Ah?" Master Ching Chen was shocked. "There's such an expert in the West Sea?" Looking at Su Zhuoyang again, he touched his chin with his hand and his eyes flashed with a silver-white color, as if he was thinking about something. "Swansea, what's there to think about?" Leopard Jinren said anxiously, "Isn't it just right to have someone who is proficient in magic arrays to replace that bald donkey? If he doesn't agree, the four of us can just kill him. What's there to hesitate about?" "Leopard Jinren, it's not that simple," Chu Muhuan said with a smile. "Since there's such an ancient magic array and he's cultivating in seclusion in the West Sea, the overseas cultivators are usually more tyrannical than us. If we disturb him and can't persuade him, our tracks will be exposed. It's not good for this trip." Although Chu Muhuan didn't say that the four of them would work together, his tone was extremely obvious. "The overseas cultivators are powerful. I admit it," Leopard Jinren sneered, "but along the way, there aren't any powerful sea beasts within 1,000 miles. There's only a sea beast whose strength is between the 3rd and 4th level of essence power in about 800 miles. If there's really an overseas cultivator who's more powerful than us, the surrounding sea beasts wouldn't be so weak, right? Then, the overseas cultivator wouldn't need to use such a magic array to protect himself, right? Although that's the case, the real situation may not be so." Master Ching Chen said faintly, "The reason why overseas cultivators are called overseas cultivators is that most of them are cynical and can't coexist peacefully with us 3 continents immortal friends, so they cultivate in seclusion. These overseas cultivators can't be judged by common sense. In addition, many of the overseas cultivators, what they cultivate isn't the ordinary cultivation method of our 3 continents. It has nothing to do with us Confucian cultivators or Buddhist sects." Chu Muhuan frowned slightly as if he thought of something and said in a low voice, "Their cultivation method is strange, and their divine abilities are even sharper. The 9th level of essence power isn't suitable for their realm." Seeing that Master Ching Chen and Chu Muhuan were refuting him, Leopard Jinren's withered yellow eyes rolled. He opened his mouth and was about to spit out demonic aura. Seeing this, Su Zhuoyang hastily flew down a few feet and said anxiously, "Leopard Jinren, don't be too hasty." Leopard Jinren didn't want to give Su Zhuoyang face, so he snorted coldly and put his claws behind his back. He raised his head and looked at the night sky. A bright moon had appeared in the horizon. The moonlight fell on the surface of the sea like water, and the rarely seen bright white splashes of water surged. Tiny silver fish swam along with the sparkling waves, and the sound of the waves entered their ears. Chapter 31:16. Su Zhuoyang discussed with Chu Muhuan and Master Ching Chen in a low voice for a moment. Then he raised his voice and said to Leopard's spiritual master, "Fellow immortal leopard, I've decided. I'll ask this overseas cultivator to come out. Of course, even if he can help, we can't tell him our purpose now. If he's not willing to help, we'll go by ourselves." "You should have done this earlier," Leopard's spiritual master sneered. You can just call for that person. Why ask me? Ha, fellow immortal leopard, you should stand with us. Su Zhuoyang said carefully, if you stand there, if that overseas cultivator comes out and sees us surrounding him, I'm afraid there will be some misunderstanding. There might be some twists and turns for no reason. Leopard spiritual master looked at Su Zhuoyang several times and didn't say anything. His figure turned into the wind and floated behind the three people. However, he was still 100 feet away and didn't come any closer. Brother Chu. Su Zhuoyang was satisfied when he saw this. He turned around and was about to speak when Chu Muhuan suddenly slapped his forehead and exclaimed, I remember now. This seems to be the legendary heavenly cycle star formation. How is that possible? Su Zhuoyang's eyes lit up. Apart from being surprised, he was also ecstatic. It's said that this cosmic star formation has been lost for a long time. Only the immortal palace? Brother Su, I'm just guessing. I can't be sure. Chu Muhuan's face also showed a trace of joy. If it's the legendary cosmic star formation, this formation isn't something you and I can break. It's not good for us to attack this formation without permission. Brother, please use the cloud crane technique and transmit our goodwill into the formation. Su Zhuoyang urged. Chu Muhuan shook his head slightly. If it's the cosmic star formation, its defense must be flawless. I can't guarantee that the cloud crane can fly in. Let's try it. Su Zhuoyang smiled. If Brother's cloud crane can break through this formation, then our chances of entering the West Sea's lost treasure will be reduced by 20%. Chu Muhuan laughed heartily and made a grabbing motion with his hand. A clear and crystalline light flashed like moonlight, and a 3-inch tall cloud crane phantom appeared. Chu Muhuan softly muttered a few words at the cloud crane's neck. Then he pointed with his finger. Quick! The cloud crane's body stretched and flew toward the lava island below everyone's feet. As Yunhe charged into the lava, Chu Muhuan's spirit-cleansing eyes and Su Zhuoyang's thousand-eyes pupils were activated. They stared closely at Yunhe's figure. A moment later, the unusual phenomenon in their eyes disappeared at the same time. They looked at each other with a trace of understanding in their eyes. Sure enough, the cloud crane's silhouette flew out and landed in front of Chu Muhuan. Chu Muhuan waved his sleeve again, and the silhouette disappeared into his sleeve. Looks like this Su will have to take some responsibility. Su Zhuoyang smiled and opened his mouth. A golden sword light flew out. Su Zhuoyang spread his hands and formed a strange sword seal. The golden sword light split into 8 in midair. Buzz, buzz. It emitted a strong buzzing sound and rushed into the lava. Rumble! The moment the 8 golden lights fell into the lava, the entire lava island let out an earth-shaking sound. The sea near the lava island shook violently. Leopard's spiritual master, who was dozens of feet away from the three of them, suddenly exclaimed. He had been coldly observing Su Zhuoyang and the others' actions. His eyes were fixed on the sparkling and translucent moon disk. At this moment, along with the violent rumbling of the lava island, countless dark clouds suddenly appeared in the clear night sky around the full moon. Layers upon layers of dark clouds covered the entire area. Although there was no lightning or rain yet, within the layers of clouds, there were faint flashes of light that were beginning to appear. Crackle! A tall and skinny figure emerged from the lava island amidst a series of flashes of lightning and thunder. Before he could reveal himself in midair, a voice that sounded like a ferocious god sneered coldly in the night sky. Hee, the 2 old fogies didn't dare to come themselves, so they sent 4 little bastards over instead. Come. Let this Shao see how you 4 foreign cultivators are going to capture this Shao. Following this furious roar like that of a killing god, countless lightning bolts rained down from the dark clouds in the sky, completely enveloping the 4 of them. 9 heavens lightning strike. Chu Muhuan was completely stunned. When the lightning and fire were almost within reach, he seemed to have thought of something. He hurriedly threw the rattan cane in his hand and opened his mouth. Swoosh! With a breath of vital energy, the rattan cane suddenly turned into a towering tree. Its green branches and leaves expanded wildly, as if to cover Su Zhuoyang and the others. Master Qingchen was also shocked. She was even faster than Chu Muhuan. The space-splitting cauldron rushed out from her hand, and a flame appeared. Suddenly, a huge fireball appeared about 100 feet away, blocking the top of Chu Muhuan's rattan cane. Fellow immortal, calm down, calm down. Su Zhuoyang's flying sword fell into the lava island and didn't fly out. His face was even more panicked. Seeing the 9 heavens lightning strike, he couldn't understand what Xiaohua was saying. He could only hurriedly shout, "We are fellow immortals from the continent, not foreign cultivators. We are not sent by your enemies. Fellow immortal, you only need to withdraw your magical power, and we will explain everything." The human figure that rushed out of the lava island was naturally Xiaohua. When he saw that the capital star formation was discovered and the sword light fell, he had long suspected that the 2 old ghosts from the Immortal Ascension sect and the Immortal Music sect were here. However, when he saw that the 4 people standing in midair outside the lava island were not old monsters above the nascent soul stage, he didn't take a closer look. He thought that they were cultivators from the 4 islands overseas who came to seek revenge under the orders of the 2 old ghosts. As soon as they met, they used the thunder-attracting technique. Moreover, the spirit-killing vital light and the Tai green light were already prepared. When the 9 heavens lightning strike struck, he believed that even if the 4 of them were of the nascent soul stage, he could definitely kill 1 or 2 of them with a sneak attack. Fellow immortal? However, when he heard Su Zhuoyang call him fellow immortal, and the language was very different from the language of the Dawn Rain continent. It was very obscure and had a very ancient style. It was also different from the language of Qua Rhyming and the others from the Sunset Island. Xiaohua couldn't help but be surprised. Fortunately, he could understand the 2 words, fellow immortal. In particular, when he scanned the 4 people with his divine thought, he was even more stunned. He pointed at Su Zhuoyang and said in an incredulous voice, "You are a Confucian cultivator?" Rumble. Just as Xiaohua was wondering, the thunder-attracting technique finally fell. The first thing it hit was naturally Master Qingchen's splitting cauldron. The fireballs that were hundreds of feet long exploded along with the lightning. It was as powerful as a volcanic sea of fire. However, in the blink of an eye, all the fireballs were destroyed. Wizard Qingchen's face turned red, and he spat out a small mouthful of blood. The cracked space cauldron fell into Wizard Qingchen's hand with a wail. Buddhism sect. Seeing Master Qingchen's clothes and the familiar Buddhist awareness, Xiaohua's mouth was wide open and he could hardly close it. Xiaohua's indescribable shock made him forget the layers of thunder. He only used his eyes and divine thought to look between Su Zhuoyang and Master Qingchen. He was more greedy than looking at his first love from more than 10 years ago. Fellow immortal, fellow immortal. Seeing that Master Qingchen's splitting cauldron couldn't withstand Xiaohua's thunder, Su Zhuoyang was anxious again. He knew that the Buddha fire of the splitting cauldron was similar to the thunder falling from the 9th heaven. Perhaps it wouldn't be destroyed by the thunder falling from the 9th heaven. However, Chu Muhuan's rattan staff was of the vegetation attribute. Although it wasn't afraid of heavenly thunder, the rattan staff itself was weak and might not be able to withstand heavenly thunder. If the rattan staff was destroyed, the trip to the West Sea would be much more difficult. Therefore he had to beg for mercy. Please stop the thunder falling from the 9th heaven. Don't hurt fellow immortal Chu's imperial equipment. We will leave immediately. Su Zhuoyang spoke too much, so Xiaohua naturally didn't understand. However, looking at Su Zhuoyang's anxiety and the 4 people standing together, Xiaohua understood a little. Seeing that the thunder was about to strike, although the big tree transformed from the rattan staff wasn't afraid of heavenly thunder, under the seemingly endless thunder, its green leaves had already fallen everywhere. Green light flashed rapidly. Xiaohua hurriedly urged his magic power to stop the thunder and shouted, "If you're not from the 4 islands abroad, where are you from? Quickly tell me, otherwise don't blame me for being impolite." Xiaohua spoke too much, but Su Zhuoyang also didn't understand. He had the same feeling as Xiaohua. He only felt that Xiaohua's language was simple and unadorned, as if it was passed down from ancient times. However, if he listened carefully, it was specious and he didn't understand it at all. Fellow immortal. Su Zhuoyang smiled bitterly, cupped his fists and bowed. We're not cultivators from the 5 islands abroad. However, after saying half a sentence, he stopped again. Xiaohua clearly didn't understand him, so what was the point of him saying it? Fellow immortal? Xiaohua, on the other hand, heard these 2 words clearly. His eyes turned and he opened his mouth. A beam of tiny azure light rushed out of his mouth. It danced in the air like a thin flood dragon, and then fell into his mouth. Sword Chi. You're also from my Confucian cultivator lineage. Su Zhuoyang's eyes lit up, and he blurted out a few words passed down from the inscription armor. Good, Xiaohua let out a sigh of relief. The Confucian cultivation method and elixir heart arts left behind by Huang Yi also had some pronunciation of the inscription armor. Although it seemed incomplete, now it was the only language that could be used to communicate. Who are you waiting for? Xiaohua somewhat stuttered as he asked with the inscription armor. I'm Su Zhuoyang. Su Zhuoyang's mouth was bitter. He racked his brains and brought out all the inscription armor he knew, slowly telling the origins of the 4 people. What? Hearing Su Zhuoyang's end, Xiaohua was even more confused. What hidden immortal continent? What pure land? What 1,000 demons' sacred realm? How come I've never heard of any of them? You're not cultivators from the 5 islands abroad, then where did you come from? Oh, which direction? When Xiaohua finished speaking, he faintly realized something and hurriedly asked. Old brother Chu and I are Confucian cultivators, so we naturally came from the east. The hidden immortal continent is in that place. Su Zhuoyang answered in bewilderment. Chapter 31:17. Buzz. All of a sudden, Xiaohua's mind went blank. There's a hidden immortal continent in the depths of Guihe Sea? How come I've never heard of it? Moreover, wasn't this Confucian cultivator killed by the Tao sect long ago? How could he still be hiding in this bullshit hidden immortal continent? What about her? Xiaohua pointed at Master Qing Chen, who had already taken a pill and was healing herself. Master Qing Chen is a Buddhist sect master, so she naturally came from the southern paradise. Although there are Buddhist sects in the other 3 continents, only the Buddhist sect in the southern paradise is authentic. Su Zhuoyang replied cautiously. How is this possible? Xiaohua almost blurted out. Nonsense, he had already been to the Buddhist sect's ruins. How could there be a Buddhist sect in Guihe Sea above Xiaoyu continent? How could there be a southern paradise like Xiaoyu continent in the depths of Guihe Sea? Why is it impossible? Su Zhuoyang understood and asked puzzledly. What about that guy? Xiaohua pointed at Master Leopard in the distance and said, Is he a beast cultivator? Beast cultivator? Su Zhuoyang finally figured out the meaning of beast cultivator in the inscription on the armor and was even more puzzled than Xiaohua. He glanced at Master Leopard, who had an unkind expression, and said in a low voice, This Master Leopard came from the 1,000 demons' sacred realm in the north. It's a continent about the same size as the hidden immortal continent and the southern paradise. It's filled with immortal beasts and immortal birds that have turned into spirits. It's different from us Confucian cultivators and Buddhist sects. This. Xiaohua was somewhat distressed. What's all this about? It's a mess. Fellow immortal. Seeing Xiaohua angry, Su Zhuoyang smiled and said, Fellow immortal, aren't you an overseas cultivator? Fellow immortal, where did you get your Confucian cultivator inheritance? Who said I'm an overseas cultivator? Xiaohua rolled his eyes and said coldly, I'm a cultivator from Shi country. Speaking up to hear, Xiaohua frowned slightly. Wasn't he a loose cultivator now? It's not impossible to call him an overseas cultivator. Oh, Shi country? Su Zhuoyang was stunned, then he suddenly realized and clapped. Fellow immortal Xiao is an overseas cultivator from Shi country. Fellow immortal, which Confucian cultivator's descendant are you? What are you talking about? Xiaohua waved his hand and asked indifferently, Let me ask you, do you know about Dawn Rain Continent? Dawn Rain Continent? Su Zhuoyang blinked his eyes and shook his head in confusion, indicating that he had never heard of it. Where is this place? What about over there? Xiao Hua very calmly pointed at his feet, then pointed to the far west behind him and asked, "Fellow immortal Xiao." Su Zhuoyang said curiously, "This is the West Ocean. Further west is the depths of the Western Sea, where the origin qi is thin. No one will go any further." Although Xiao Hua was somewhat prepared in his heart, he still sucked in a breath of cold air and couldn't help but turn his head to the west. Pung. Right at this moment, an earthen yellow mountain appeared above Xiao Hua's head, immediately trapping the area around Xiao Hua. An incomparably powerful force smashed down on Xiao Hua. "Fellow immortal leopard," Su Zhuoyang said in shock. Xiao Hua suddenly turned his head, and a trace of surprise flashed through his eyes. He waved his hand. Wung wung. An even louder rumbling sound was heard, and the overturning sea seal rushed out of the space. Countless rays of light blossomed, and countless pearls hung down, turning into a seal even bigger than the magnificent mountain box. "Fellow immortal Xiao, please be merciful. This thing still has great uses." Su Zhuoyang couldn't help but cry out miserably. Xiao Hua sneered and casually agreed. Boom! A loud sound was heard, and the earthen yellow mountain was smashed into pieces by Xiao Hua's overturning sea seal. The light disappeared into the magnificent mountain box, and Xiao Hua's overturning sea seal didn't chase after it. It turned into a small seal and fell into Xiao Hua's hand. A fierce glint flashed across Panther's spiritual master's withered, yellow eyes. However, his ugly face turned extremely yellow. He could not help but slap his hand, take out the sea beast's monster core he had obtained earlier, and swallow it in one gulp. "Thank you, fellow immortal Xiao." Su Zhuoyang saw that Xiao Hua didn't take advantage of the victory to chase after him, so he hurriedly bowed and said, "This Su doesn't dare to delay fellow immortal's cultivation. This Su and the others will take our leave now." Wait, Su Zhuoyang wanted to leave, but Xiao Hua didn't allow it. He said indifferently, "Tell this Xiao everything about the hidden immortal continent, Western Paradise, and the 1,000 demons' sacred realm." This. Su Zhuoyang smiled bitterly. He looked at the dark clouds in the sky that didn't dissipate, and said with a smile, "Fellow immortal, this Su has an important matter that can't be delayed. This Su will definitely pay a visit to apologize for disturbing fellow immortal today. If fellow immortal Xiao has any problems, this Su will definitely tell you everything at that time." "Oh," Xiao Hua smiled, "since you have an important matter, why did you come to disturb this Xiao?" This. Su Zhuoyang was helpless. He thought for a while and said, "This Su and the others have an important matter. We need someone who is proficient in formations." "Oh, you saw this Xiao's formation?" Xiao Hua was a bit confused. "How could you see it?" "Fellow immortal." Xiao Hua was so curious that Su Zhuoyang couldn't resist. He smiled bitterly and said, "This lowly one doesn't have enough time. Moreover, this lowly one really doesn't understand what you're saying." Xiao Hua saw that Su Zhuoyang was really anxious. Moreover, Su Zhuoyang had a very good impression of Confucian cultivators, so he didn't want to make things difficult for Su Zhuoyang. He pointed at his feet. Whoosh! A golden sword light flew out from the capital sky star formation and fell into Su Zhuoyang's hand. "Go! Don't disturb this Xiao in the future." Su Zhuoyang saw this, and although he was very regretful, he was also happy. He put away the flying sword and bowed. "This Su thanks fellow immortal Xiao." At this time, Master Qing Qin, Chu Muhuan, and Leopard Spiritual Master were all adjusting their breathing. When they saw Su Zhuoyang leave, they stood up and didn't dare to stay here. They slightly bowed and were about to leave together. Wait. Just when the three of them were about to leave, Xiao Hua suddenly realized something and hurriedly shouted. Su Zhuoyang's heart thumped, but he still had to stop. He smiled and said, "Fellow immortal Xiao, is there anything else?" "This Xiao Hua wants to ask this." "Master of the Buddhist sect." Xiao Hua pointed at Master Qing Qin and said, "Benefactor Xiao, please ask." Master Qing Qin was a little puzzled. Although there was some resentment in his heart, He still put his palms together and asked. Unexpectedly, he also spoke the inscription of Confucian cultivators. Do you know about the heart destruction realm? Xiaohua asked, not caring about Master Qing Chen's pronunciation at all. Master Qing Chen raised his eyebrows and nodded lightly. Of course I know about the heart destruction realm. The so-called heart destruction realm is the nirvana realm. When the senior monks of the Buddhist sect cultivate to the depth, they can destroy all thoughts, all qi, and even life force. In this nirvana realm, they can find the true self. It's the supreme true path to achieve the Buddha fruit. How to get out of the heart destruction realm? Xiaohua asked again. Get out? Master Qing Chen said with a smile. Naturally, it's up to fate. The longer the process of finding the true self, the harder it is to get out. The longer you stay in the heart destruction realm, the more advantageous it is for the cultivation of the Buddhist sect. It can even achieve the Buddha fruit. Xiaohua was helpless. What Master Qing Chen said was the same as what the dead Hanju said. There was nothing to hide. How do outsiders wake it up? Xiaohua asked finally. Outsiders? Why do outsiders have to wake it up? Master Qing Chen smiled even more. Why do ordinary senior monks have to wake it up when they can't even dream of it? Forget it. Xiaohua waved his hand. Do you know which senior monk in the Pure Land has entered the heart destruction realm and then got out? Do you still need to ask? The first one to bear the brunt is my Buddha fruit. Master Qing Chen answered without hesitation. Before the Buddha fruit, his heart destruction realm lasted for 981,000 years. Only then did he realize his true self, get out of the 3,000 great worlds, achieve the supreme Buddha fruit, obtain the supreme golden body, and set foot in Leiyin Temple. Where is Leiyin Temple? Xiaohua asked. Leiyin Temple is the holy land of the Buddhist sect. How would I know? Master Qing Chen looked pious. What? You're a Buddhist sect cultivator. You don't know? Xiaohua was surprised. Su Zhuoyang smiled at the side. Fellow immortal Xiao, don't make things difficult for Master Qing Chen. It's true. I can assure you that even 99% of the Buddhist sect's disciples don't know the location of Leiyin Temple, let alone Master. Forget it, Xiaohua sighed. However, he still didn't give up and asked, could it be that Master Qing Chen doesn't know any senior monks who have entered the heart destruction realm? If Benefactor Xiao asks others this question, it's really not easy to answer. Master Qing Chen smiled and said, unfortunately, I do know such an eminent monk. Although he has only been in the heart-extinguishing realm for half a year, he meets the requirements of fellow immortal. Moreover, because this senior monk has only entered the heart destruction realm for a short time, he has never mentioned it to others. Who? Not only Xiaohua asked, but Su Zhuoyang and the others were also curious. It's not difficult for Benefactor Xiao to know. Master Qing Chen smiled and said, that senior monk has never seen outsiders. If fellow immortal is fated to meet him, you can follow us to the West Sea. After we finish our business, we will personally accompany Benefactor to that place. Xiaohua sneered. He stared at Master Qing Chen and said indifferently, are you threatening me? Do you think I won't use the soul-searching technique? Master Qing Chen's expression didn't change. He shook his head and said, my Buddhist sect emphasizes karma. There are no more than 3 people who know that senior monk's heart destruction realm, and I am one of them. In this boundless West Sea, Benefactor Xiao actually met me and asked me about this matter. Benefactor Xiao, don't you think you should go with me? Moreover, I have been friends with Su Tanyue for a long time. The pronunciation of the ancient inscription was also taught by Su Tanyue. I have always admired the awe-inspiring righteousness of Confucian cultivators. Since Benefactor Xiao is a Confucian cultivator, you naturally have righteousness. How can you use the soul-searching technique on me? This. Xiaohua's eyes flickered. He looked at Master Qing Chen and pondered. Chapter 31:18. Su Zhuoyang and the others were overjoyed. They naturally knew what Master Qing Chen meant. They had seen Xiaohua's magical power and knew that he would be a great help. Moreover, Xiaohua was proficient in formations. If he could accompany them, they would be able to get the West Sea's treasure. As for Xiaohua, before he saw the three of them, he would not leave Lava Island. His purpose of seclusion was to reach the nascent soul stage or even the separating spirit stage. However, after listening to the three's introduction, it seemed that this was no longer the Kueha Sea, but the West Sea. Moreover, there was no Xiaoyu continent, but 3 continents. In other words, Xiaohua's archenemy was gone. He didn't know anyone here. It didn't matter where he cultivated or not left Lava Island. Moreover, he now knew that the further east he went, the more abundant the spiritual chi of heaven and earth was. Further east was the hidden immortal continent, not the depths of the Kuai-He Sea as he had imagined. Instead, behind him was the daybreak continent in his mind, but now it was the depths of the West Sea, where the spiritual chi of heaven and earth was thin. All his cognition had been changed. Besides, he had always been worried about Jiang Luo. It had been 100 years, but Jiang Luo still hadn't woken up. Although Xiaohua would check on Jiang Luo every once in a while to see if he was alive, Xiaohua didn't dare to delay any longer. Although Master Qingchen said that the Buddha Lord's heart had been destroyed for 81,000 years, that was only after he had succeeded in cultivating Buddhism. Xiaohua didn't dare to gamble with Jiang Luo's life. Now that he could leave and find an opportunity to wake him up, Xiaohua must seize it. Xiaohua was afraid that he couldn't wake Jiang Luo up from the state of heart destruction. Alas, there's still that damn nebula gold core. In these 10 years, there's no change in my realm. My magic power has also stopped growing, as if I've reached a bottleneck. And this bottleneck is a dead end. If I can't find a way to break out of this situation, I'm afraid I'll have to hide in this gold core stage for the rest of my life. Xiaohua immediately thought of his own cultivation. The progress of Confucian cultivation is also very strange. I clearly cultivate according to the cultivation method, but in the end, I always can't completely enter the qi refinement stage. I don't know why I can't refine that strand of core. My own core is also just a simple outline. He could only wait for this person's core of elixir to disappear before he could truly condense it. In such a situation, I can only find the answer by asking these cultivators who practice Confucian cultivation, right? If this Xiao continues to work behind closed doors like this, I will never be able to find the answer. All right. Thinking of this, Xiaohua clapped his hands and said, "This Xiao will go with you." However, this Xiao hopes that Venerable will inform this Xiao of the location first. Great. When Su Zhuoyang heard this, a smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. He clapped his hands happily and said, "With fellow immortal Zhao's help, great things can be done." Su Xuanzi. Next to him, Taoist Leopard's complexion changed a bit. He glanced at everyone who was beaming with joy and reminded, although fellow immortal Xiao can participate, we have a bit more assurance. Covered with his strength, I'm afraid we have to make things clear in advance. The things that this old man wants can't be lacking in any way. He, fellow immortal leopard is overthinking. When Su Zhuoyang heard Taoist Leopard's voice transmission, he couldn't help but laugh. He also transmitted his voice, that West Sea's lost treasures are innumerable. As long as we can break through the great array and enter, wouldn't we be able to get whatever we want? Moreover, there was originally Zen Master Kong's share. Now that it has changed to fellow immortal Xiao, there isn't any change in the previous allocation. This old man still feels that it's inappropriate. Taoist Leopard was still not at ease. We are only around the 4th grade of essence energy. This fellow immortal Xiao is probably almost at the 5th grade of essence energy. His origin is unknown. If at that time, he has other thoughts, even our lives will be in danger. Su Zhuoyang smiled. If he has other thoughts, can we safely leave now? That's not the same. Taoist Leopard shook his head. Right now, there are no West Sea's lost treasures. This old man knows that you humans, there are many cases of people dying for wealth and birds dying for food. When Su Zhuoyang heard this, he couldn't help but ponder slightly. On the other side, Master Qingchen also pondered for a moment and said to Xiaohua, "Benefactor Xiao, it's not that this poor nun doesn't want to make things clear to you. It's just that that senior monk doesn't like to show off. There are very few people who know about this matter. If you go, not only will you not be able to see him, but you will also expose this poor nun, and things won't be good. Only this poor nun can accompany you and earnestly ask him first. Only then will there be hope. And that's for sure. Xiao Hua nodded. This is one of the conditions of this Xiao. This Xiao just wants to hear the name of this place in advance. Alright. Master Qing Qin knew that if she didn't say it, Xiao Hua definitely wouldn't go. She nodded and softly transmitted a few words. Xiao Hua's expression didn't change, as if he didn't hear anything. After Master Qing Qin finished speaking, he didn't hesitate and cupped his hands. Everyone, please wait a moment. This Xiao will go and pack up and immediately follow everyone. After saying that, his figure turned into the wind and rushed into Lava Island. Brother Su, seeing Xiao Hua's figure disappear, Chu Muhuan also whispered, "This fellow immortal Zhao's learning is very complicated. In addition to the magical abilities of our Confucian cultivators, there are more Taoist rogue cultivators. Most of these rogue cultivators who are obsessed with Taoism are unscrupulous in their pursuit of power. Brother Chu's doubts are normal," Su Zhuoyang said with a smile. However, in this Su's eyes, this fellow immortal Xiao is upright and upright. He's not the kind of rogue cultivator that Brother Chu said. Moreover, to tell you the truth, this Su has seen a few rogue cultivators before, and they are completely different from this fellow immortal Xiao. At least those rogue cultivators have such strength. I'm afraid that we can't escape unscathed. By the way, Master Qing Qin, you practice Buddhist magical abilities, especially heavenly hearing, which is very useful for identifying people. What do you think of this fellow immortal Xiao? This benefactor Xiao is very strange. Master Qing Qin frowned. This poor nun didn't detect any Buddhist cultivation on him, but this poor nun heard a familiar aura from him. This aura is unique to senior monks who practice Buddhist cultivation methods. Therefore, this poor nun just now invited him with confidence. Hiss, as soon as Master Qing Qin said this, the other three people gasped, especially Leopard Spiritual Master, who almost blurted out, "How is that possible? This overseas cultivator not only has Confucian elemental energy, but also Taoist magic power. This is already rare and commendable. Now he is also hiding Buddhist telekinesis." Leopard Spiritual Master said a few times, but he didn't know what he wanted to say. Master Qing Qin, can you confirm? Su Zhuoyang bit his lip and looked at Master Qing Qin with bright eyes. This poor nun can't confirm. Master Qing Qin smiled bitterly. This poor nun first used Buddhist consciousness to probe, then used heavenly hearing, but I couldn't see his cultivation. I'm afraid he has a Buddhist treasure on him? Chu Muhuan reminded. But Master Qing Qin also bit her lip like Su Zhuoyang. This poor nun can't even detect his Confucian elemental energy. Could it be that his cultivation has surpassed the 5th level of elemental energy? Chu Muhuan was also shocked. This person is too mysterious. Leopard Spiritual Master shook his head. I think this trip is worrying. Fellow immortal leopard can rest assured. In the end, Su Zhuoyang had to lay his cards on the table. Long before coming to the West Sea, this Su has already used the divine divination technique to divine. This trip is very auspicious. In other words, Chu Muhuan's eyes lit up and he smiled. Although Zen Master Liao Kong didn't come, this fellow immortal Xiao is the array master sent by the heavens? This is why Brother Su wanted to recruit fellow immortal Xiao as soon as he saw him? That's right. Su Zhuoyang didn't show any pride on his face, but frowned and said, "This Su thought so. But you didn't expect fellow immortal Xiao to be so difficult to invite." Master Qing Qin was also in a good mood and she smiled. He almost made us fight. Even Su Tanyue wanted to retreat at that time. Speaking of this, Master Qing Qin changed the topic and asked, "By the way, Su Tanyue, if this poor nun didn't say anything and couldn't invite fellow immortal Xiao, then would Su Tanyue's divine divination technique have a flaw?" How is that possible?" Chu Muhuan laughed and said, "How can my divine divination technique have a flaw? Master's words have already been included in Brother Su's calculations. Su Zhuoyang waved his hand and said, Brother Chu, this is also where this Su has doubts. What do you mean? Chu Muhuan was a little puzzled. He was a Confucian cultivator, so naturally he was very attracted to the divine divination technique. Leopard Spiritual Master said coldly, the West Sea lost treasure is passed down from ancient times, and it has been lost in the West Sea for many years. I don't know how many fellow immortals have come to look for it, but this old man is not stupid enough to think that I can definitely enter it. Su Swanzi's great fortune has a problem. Chu Muhuan naturally understood with a hint, and his heart also became alert. He glanced at the lava island where Xiaohua disappeared and asked curiously, could it be that this great fortune is because of fellow immortal Xiao? Brother Chu's thinking may be correct. Fellow immortal Leopard's thinking is also correct. Su Zhuoyang smiled bitterly. This Su's divine divination technique is only at a small level, how can it be perfect? To be able to obtain a great fortune, this Su was originally ecstatic. But then he was puzzled. As fellow immortal Leopard said, how can this West Sea treasure hunt be a great fortune? If it was a little thrilling, this Su would also believe it. However, looking at fellow immortal Xiao now, this Su somewhat believes it. But even so, it can't be a great fortune. Yes, the four of them knew their own cultivation, so how could there be a great fortune in the West Sea treasure hunt? Needless to say, if Su Zhuoyang's divine divination technique was not wrong, then this great fortune fell on fellow immortal Xiao, an overseas itinerant cultivator whose name they didn't even know. Chapter 31:19. Let's hope so. Although the four of them didn't speak, they all thought of the latter at the same time. Just as the four of them were having some inexplicable thoughts before leaving, Xiaohua came out from Lava Island again. Although Lava Island was barren, after all, he had cultivated for more than 100 years. It was the place where Xiaohua had stayed for the longest time since he started cultivating. Xiaohua actually felt somewhat reluctant to leave. Peaceful days of cultivation were hard to find. Xiaohua was very clear that after being discovered by Su Zhuoyang and the others, he had involuntarily fallen into the karma of the three continents. This karma would become more and more complicated. His experience would definitely change because of the three continents, and perhaps the three continents would also change because of his appearance. Of course, because of the existence of Jiang Luer, even if the four of them didn't appear, Xiaohua would inevitably fall into the karma. It was just that the time and opportunity were different. Fellow immortal Xiao, have you packed up? Seeing Xiaohua fly out, Su Zhuoyang greeted him with a smile. It's just a big formation, nothing else. Xiaohua didn't hide anything. I've packed up the things to set up the formation. Speaking of this, Xiaohua's heart moved and he asked, fellow immortal Su, if possible, can you give me the map and signs of this place? Su Zhuoyang was stunned. He thought he had misheard and asked curiously, fellow immortal Xiao, this inscription? I'm not particularly familiar with it. Do you mean the sea map and signs of this place? Yes, that's right. Xiaohua rolled his eyes and nodded. Back then, I came here by accident, and I don't know the direction anymore. Moreover, if fellow immortal Su has a jade slip with records of the hidden immortal continent, let me have a look. Jade slip? Su Zhuoyang was even more confused. Su Xiangyue, behind him, Master Qing Chen reminded, what fellow immortal Xiao is talking about is something recorded in ancient times. Nowadays, our three continents use jade eyes. I see. Su Zhuoyang looked at Xiaohua strangely. He really didn't understand. This fellow immortal Zhao's words were not only simple, but his knowledge was also simple. Xiaohua's heart thumped, and he secretly became alert. He didn't understand the situation of the three continents very well. If he said too much, he would definitely reveal something. Since that was the case, it was better not to say anything. Can fellow immortal Xiao give me your name? At this time, Su Zhuoyang still didn't know Xiaohua's name. Moreover, it seemed that the five of them hadn't officially announced their names to Xiaohua. Oh, this one is Xiaohua. Xiao Hua only said his name and didn't mention anything else. Su Zhuoyang smiled bitterly, but he couldn't force Xiao Hua. Then he gave his name. Master Pure Dust, Chu Muhuan, and Leopard Spiritual Master also came forward to meet him. Xiao Hua was very interested in this Leopard Taoist master and couldn't help but glance at him a few more times. This Leopard Jinren was very similar to the beast cultivators of the Huan nation. However, after listening to Su Zhuoyang's introduction, Xiao Hua realized that the two were completely different. This Leopard Jinren should be a real leopard and not a combination of the Huan nation's beastmen. What was special was that this Leopard Spiritual Master did not have a name at all. It was unknown if it was because he did not give himself a name or if it was some rule of the Thousand Demons' sacred realm. Xiao Hua didn't dare to ask any more questions. Fellow immortal Xiao, do you have any mounts? Or flying on a sword? After the 5 people greeted each other, Master Pure Dust and Chu Muhuan released their mounts. Su Zhuoyang opened his mouth and the golden flying sword rushed out and landed at his feet. Xiao Hua looked curiously at the rainbow Luan and cloud crane. He clapped his hands and took out a flying sword. He said with a smile, "This one is a rogue cultivator from overseas. How can I have any mounts? I can only fly on a sword." Fellow immortal Xiao? Su Zhuoyang saw that the quality of Xiao Hua's flying sword was extraordinary and its style was extremely simple. He was very surprised. "You're flying on a sword? Don't you need the flying sword from before?" "No need. This flying sword is enough." Xiao Hua smiled and opened his mouth. The overwhelming righteous energy in his middle dantian rushed out and landed on the flying sword. Buzz! The flying sword made a sword hum and sword radiance shot out in all directions. It slowly vibrated as if it was about to spread its wings and fly out. "Wonderful!" Su Zhuoyang's eyes lit up. He clapped his hands and said, This seems to be the long-lost sword technique of us Confucian cultivators, right?" "This one doesn't know." Xiao Hua flatly refused to reveal. Since Xiao Hua started practicing the core heart technique of Confucian cultivators, he no longer used the sword origin of sword cultivators. However, when Xiao Hua was practicing true qi, he discovered that the overwhelming righteous energy had the same effect as the sword origin. It could also drive flying swords. Moreover, the flying swords in his space, whether they were transformed into swords or illusory swords, under the influence of this true qi, they could be used as if they were his arms. In particular, this Confucian cultivator's true qi was the same as the sword origin. It didn't consume any meridians. Usually, it was only refined in the middle dantian. When it was used, it could be used at will and produce the same effect as magical power. Now, listening to Su Zhuoyang's words, it should be some kind of elemental force. Su Zhuoyang saw that Xiao Hua was so stingy. He asked one question after another and knew that it was not good to ask too much. They still had a few hours to travel together. Moreover, with this trip to the West Sea, they could communicate more in the future. Su Zhuoyang believed that with his own ability, it was not impossible to obtain Xiao Hua's trust. Therefore, he didn't ask too much. Immediately after, Su Zhuoyang experienced Xiao Hua's stinginess. Master Jingxin rode on the Rainbow Luan, Chu Muhuan rode on the Cloud Crane, and Master Leopard rode on the Demon Wind. Under Su Zhuoyang's guidance, they flew to the southwest. Su Zhuoyang rode on the Sword Light and accompanied Xiao Hua as they flew behind the 3 people. Su Zhuoyang originally wanted to ask Xiao Hua more, but Xiao Hua did not know anything and did not answer any of Su Zhuoyang's questions. This really made Su Zhuoyang scratch his ears and cheeks. He didn't know how to pry open Xiao Hua's mouth. After flying for half an hour, seeing that Su Zhuoyang was no longer interrogating, Xiao Hua opened his mouth and asked Su Zhuoyang again for the jade eyes that recorded the languages of the 3 continents. Su Zhuoyang naturally had this kind of jade eyes, and he wasn't stingy. He took it out from his sleeve and gave it to Xiao Hua. However, when Xiao Hua scanned it with his divine sense, he couldn't see through it at all. He couldn't help but hesitate. He knew that Su Zhuoyang had seen through his Confucian cultivation base, but that Buddhist sect's Master Qingchen didn't see through his Buddhist cultivation base. That was because his Buddha's Saraira was now stored in his Naiwan palace, and there was a layer of innate divine restriction outside his Naiwan palace. If he didn't release his Buddhist sense or deliberately release his Buddha's Saraira, others wouldn't be able to see through his Buddhist cultivation base. Xiaohua's experience in the Xiaoyu continent had already told him that he couldn't expose everything. He had to hide as much as he could. Looking at the relationship between Master Qing Chen and Su Zhuoyang, it seemed that on these three continents, whether it was Confucian cultivators, Buddhist cultivators, or Yao cultivators, they could all get along peacefully. However, if Xiaohua exposed his Buddhist cultivation, would it cause any bad consequences? This was not something that Xiaohua could know at this moment. Therefore, Xiaohua decided to hide his Buddhist cultivation base and not release his Buddhist sense. Fellow Taoist Su, Xiaohua said in a low voice, this jade slip. Oh, how do I check it with my jade eyes? Use my Confucian cultivation's divine sense technique. Or clear eyes technique, both are possible. Su Zhuoyang was really observing Xiaohua's flying sword. When he heard Xiaohua's sudden question, he replied rather puzzledly, Fellow Taoist Xiao, don't tell me you don't understand? Indeed. Xiaohua smiled bitterly. The art of Elixir Heart only recorded how to cultivate the Elixir Heart and how to refine the awe-inspiring righteousness. There really wasn't any clear eyes technique. As for divine sense technique, Xiaohua had divine sense when he cultivated his middle dantian, but now his Naiwan palace was occupied by the Buddha's Saraira. How could he still have divine sense? This divine sense was born from the Buddha's Saraira in the past. That's right, it was my negligence. Su Zhuoyang suddenly realized, fellow Taoist Xiao has a Taoist inheritance. Your divine sense technique conflicts with my Confucian cultivation's divine sense technique. This is troublesome. Unless fellow Taoist cultivates my Confucian eye technique, I'm afraid your jade eyes won't be able to see through it. Fellow Taoist Su, do you have this kind of cultivation technique? Xiaohua said without any trace of politeness, I can use spirit stones or other things to exchange with fellow Taoist. Spirit stones? Su Zhuoyang was puzzled. He didn't know whether he misheard or didn't understand Xiaohua's words. Xiaohua saw that he had made a mistake again. He thought for a moment and carefully took out a piece of low-grade spirit stone from his space. He said with a smile, this is it. Oh, fellow Taoist is talking about spirit stones. Su Zhuoyang understood and shook his head, I don't lack spirit stones. Moreover, I don't have this kind of cultivation technique. Then I'll go and ask Chu Muhuan. Xiaohua urged his flying sword and suddenly flew past Su Zhuoyang and arrived in front of Chu Muhuan. Su Zhuoyang had been observing Xiaohua's imperial sword technique all along. Now that he saw Xiaohua leave as soon as he said so, without any accumulation of power, and his speed was much faster than his own, he couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. Su Zhuoyang wasn't the only one who was surprised. Chu Muhuan's Yunhe was also startled by Xiaohua's sudden approach. He immediately stretched his neck and let out a long cry. Yunhe's vigilance attracted Chu Muhuan's attention. He also didn't expect Xiaohua to fly over without him noticing. If Xiaohua really had ulterior motives, this sneak attack would definitely be enough to make Chu Muhuan suffer. What was even more mysterious and what made Chu Muhuan even more surprised was that Xiaohua's figure flashed and calmly flew out from the flying sword. He didn't wait for Yunhe to spread his wings and speed up. He flew to Chu Muhuan's side like a gust of wind and landed on Yunhe's back. Yunhe was abnormally frightened. He used all his strength to flap his wings as if he was startled. His whole body trembled as if he was afraid and wanted to expel Xiaohua from his back. However, no matter how Yunhe struggled, Xiaohua stood steadily and didn't move in the slightest. Chu Muhuan saw this and immediately understood. It wasn't that Yunhe was afraid of Xiaohua, but that Xiaohua's actions were too strange and startled Yunhe. He hurriedly comforted Yunhe while waving his rattan staff. A cyan light flashed and wrapped both him and Xiaohua. This cyan light was really effective. Yunhe gradually returned to normal and spread his wings to fly with the rainbow luan. Chapter 31:20 Fellow immortal Xiao, Chu Muhuan wanted to berate Xiao Hua, but when he thought of Xiao Hua's terrifying methods, he restrained himself and smiled apologetically. May I know why fellow immortal Xiao suddenly came to this Chu's place? Seeing Chu Muhuan's slightly changed expression, Xiao Hua actually regretted his impulsiveness. He thought that this flying beast's mount was similar to a flying boat. How could he have known that his arrival would actually frighten Yun He so much? Therefore, Xiao Hua cupped his hands without hiding anything and said, "Fellow immortal Chu, it's all this Xiao's fault. This Xiao, he, I really didn't expect your mount to have such a big reaction." Xiao Hua's expression was very sincere without any pretense. His respect for Chu Muhuan was also very obvious. This made Chu Muhuan somewhat embarrassed and he hurriedly returned the greeting, "It's fine, it's fine. Fellow immortal Xiao has lived overseas for a long time. I'm afraid you're somewhat indifferent to some taboos." Xiao Hua scratched his head and didn't dare to say more. Chu Muhuan smiled and asked, "Fellow immortal Xiao, for you to come in such a hurry, is there something urgent?" "There's nothing urgent," Xiao Hua said somewhat awkwardly. "It's just that this Xiao doesn't understand the language of the 3 continents. I just obtained a jade eye from fellow immortal Su, but this jade eye can only be seen with divine sense or eye-clearing technique. Unfortunately, fellow immortal Zhao's Taoist divine sense technique conflicts with my Confucian divine sense technique." Once Xiao Hua said this, Chu Muhuan immediately understood. He looked at Su Zhuoyang, who was standing on a flying sword, and said with a smile, "Moreover, fellow immortal Xiao doesn't cultivate eye-clearing technique." "That's right." Xiao Hua nodded. "Therefore, this Xiao can't even see through this jade eye." "Not only that," Chu Muhuan said with a smile, "not only this jade eye can't see through it, all the jade eyes in my hidden immortal continent, even the Buddhist archives in Western Paradise and the beast skins in Thousand Devil Sacred Realm can't see through it." "That's right." Xiao Hua rubbed his hands, looking very embarrassed. "Therefore, this Xiao came here to see if fellow immortal Chu has any shallow eye-clearing technique. This Xiao will give something to immortal Chu in exchange." This Chu Muhuan's face showed that he was in a difficult position. He understood what Xiao Hua meant from his first sentence. It wasn't that he didn't have any eye-clearing techniques, but this eye-clearing technique was passed down in the Jing province's Chu clan. How could he casually exchange it with others? However, looking at Xiao Hua's delicate and pretty face, as well as his sincere expression and clear gaze, which was very similar to some of his juniors, he couldn't bear to refuse. "If fellow immortal Chu has any difficulties, please don't hesitate. Forget it then." A trace of regret flashed in Xiao Hua's eyes. He knew that he could not do this, so he did not want to force the other party. "Fellow Taoist Xiao." Chu Muhuan's mind raced. He raised his hand and said, "Please wait a moment." Xiao Hua raised an eyebrow in surprise. "Chu immortal friend. Alas, fellow immortal Xiao doesn't know." Chu Muhuan sighed. "Speaking of divine sense, it's very common in the hidden immortal continent. Just like the Taoist spiritual sense technique, there were also some superficial records that were carved on bamboo slips. Although this Chu doesn't have it today, fellow Taoist Xiao only needs to go to the continent and you can find it at any trading place. You can buy it with some spirit stones. However, eye-clearing techniques are passed down in my Confucian family. You can't find it at any trading place." "Not necessarily, right?" Xiao Hua didn't think so. He had seen a lot of such techniques on the Xiaoyu continent. As long as he had spirit stones, he might be able to find it. However, he didn't open his mouth and carefully asked, "Does fellow Taoist Chu have any good ideas?" Of course, fellow Taoist Xiao doesn't need to consider divine sense. Chu Muhuan was very satisfied with Xiao Hua's attitude and said with a smile, "You can only start with eye-clearing techniques." Yes, this is where this Xiao is in a difficult position. Xiao Hua spread his hands and quietly looked at Chu Muhuan. He knew that Chu Muhuan definitely had something to say. "Sure enough," Chu Muhuan said with a smile, "since this Chu can meet fellow Taoist Xiao, and fellow Taoist Xiao is from my Confucian family, this is definitely fate. This Chu wants to make friends with fellow Taoist Xiao. Thank you fellow Taoist Chu." Xiao Hua was very happy when he heard this and hurriedly said, I don't know if fellow Taoist Chu needs any magic tools or spirit herbs? Who would have thought that when Chu Muhuan heard this, he hurriedly waved his hand and said, Fellow Taoist Xiao misunderstands. This Chu doesn't lack anything right now. I don't need anything from fellow Taoist Xiao. Xiao Hua was stunned and asked curiously, then fellow Taoist Chu's meaning is? It's like this. Chu Muhuan explained, fellow Taoist Xiao has been overseas for a long time. Now that you've returned to the hidden immortal continent, I'm afraid you don't have a place to stay. Although my Jing province's Chu clan isn't a big clan and can't be compared to the Tianji sect, it's just a slightly famous clan in Jing province. If fellow Taoist Xiao doesn't mind, why don't you come to my Chu clan as a guest? What do you think? Guests of the curtains? What does that mean? I'm afraid it's similar to an elder's position. Xiao Hua was stunned and his heart was somewhat bewildered. However, after thinking for a moment, he slightly shook his head and said, This Xiao has liked freedom since childhood, and it's precisely because of this freedom that I paid a huge price. Now, this Xiao is overseas because of this. Fellow Taoist Chu's suggestion, this Xiao can't agree. When Chu Muhuan heard this, although there was some doubt in his eyes, it was clearly outside of his expectations. Chu Muhuan's gaze swept over the distant Su Zhuoyang. After thinking for a moment, he smiled and said, How about this, fellow Taoist Xiao? This Chu has a clear sight technique that my Chu clan's low-level disciples cultivate. It's the most basic technique. Although it's not easy to find in the hidden immortal continent, it's not considered rare in my Chu clan. If you really need it, this Chu can draw it with inscriptions. What do you think? When Xiao Hua heard Chu Muhuan say, Chu clan and hidden immortal continent is not easy to find, he naturally understood Chu Muhuan's intentions. At this moment, he was no longer the ignorant brat from before. He understood that there was no such thing as a free spirit pill in this world. He thought for a moment and straightforwardly said, Fellow Taoist Chu, this brat knows that this clear sight technique is very rare. It's a clan's secret technique. Fellow Taoist Xiao took this out with the intention of helping this brat. This brat is very grateful for this kind intention, but this brat can't make things difficult for fellow Taoist Chu. How about this? Since fellow Taoist Chu doesn't need anything in exchange, then if there's anything fellow Taoist Chu wants this brat to do, feel free to say it. As long as it's not too difficult, this brat will agree. And fellow Taoist Zhao's words make this Chu very happy. A gentleman doesn't eat handouts. This is how it should be. Chu Muhuan became even more happy. Since fellow Taoist Xiao is so frank, this Chu won't hide it from fellow Taoist. My Jing province's Chu clan has a difficult matter that requires assistance. Of course. Seeing Xiao Hua slightly wrinkle his brows, Chu Muhuan hurriedly said, This matter requires a lot of assistance. My Chu clan will invite experts to participate at an appropriate time. This Chu naturally has to contribute to the clan. Fellow Taoist Zhao's cultivation is so deep, it's precisely the assistance my Chu clan needs. Of course, since fellow Taoist Xiao is helping my Chu clan will also repay you. This clear sight technique will be paid by my Chu clan in advance. How about it? Can you tell this Xiao what the matter is now? Xiao Hua sighed in his heart and asked in a low voice. Naturally, I can't tell fellow Taoist right now. Chu Muhuan said with a smile. However, this Chu can guarantee. As long as fellow Taoist Xiao participates, my Chu clan will definitely repay you handsomely. Moreover, if fellow Taoist Xiao doesn't want to receive too much, then there's no need to put in too much effort. So that's how it is. When Xiao Hua heard this, he immediately understood. It seemed that Jing province's Chu clan's matter had a great impact and needed a lot of manpower. This Chu Muhuan must have invited a few powerful fellow Taoists. Perhaps he had taken a fancy to Xiao Hua's strength. If he could invite Xiao Hua, he would be able to explain it to his clan. As for whether Xiao Hua would contribute in the process, it wasn't something he could control. Even if Xiao Hua were to pass off as a fisheyes pearl, it should be fine. Alright. Xiao Hua nodded and said, This Xiao agrees. Good, fellow Taoist Xiao is straightforward. Let's make an oath. When Chu Muhuan heard this, his face lit up and he raised his palm. Good. Xiaohua didn't hesitate and raised his palm to Chu Muhuan's right palm. In the distance, although Su Zhuoyang didn't deliberately look over, he still paid attention. When he saw the two of them clapping their palms, he couldn't help but feel regret in his heart. He knew that Xiaohua must have made some kind of deal with Chu Muhuan. However, he also had no other choice. After all, his thousand-eyed pupils was a secret technique within the sect. It couldn't be easily taught to non-sect disciples. Although he had a wide range of connections, he really didn't have a similar technique in his bag. Alas, what can I do? Su Zhuoyang understood that Xiaohua's cultivation was unfathomable. Moreover, his character seemed to be extremely good. He was a person who was hard to come by. However, Su Zhuoyang's regret only lasted for a moment. He knew that the West Sea lost treasure had already connected Xiaohua with him and the others. As long as he succeeded this time, he would have plenty of opportunities to contact Xiaohua in the future. With Effecta Sect's strength, he could definitely establish a good relationship with Xiaohua. On the cloud crane, Chu Muhuan handed over a tiger talisman to Xiaohua and said, "This is the command talisman of my Jing province's Chu clan. Fellow Taoist Xiao, please accept it." After 3 years. Oh, of course, if fellow Taoist Xiao doesn't have any other matters, you can follow this Chu to Jing province once the matter in the West Sea is settled. This Xiao will take the command talisman first. Xiaohua took it with a smile. After this matter, this Xiao has an appointment with Master Jingchen. Of course, this Chu forgot about this matter. Chu Muhuan slapped his forehead. He really neglected the main reason why Xiaohua could go to the West Sea lost treasure. Only after Xiaohua took the command talisman did Chu Muhuan feel relieved. He smiled and said, "Fellow Taoist Xiao, please wait a moment. There aren't many of these chants. However, if you want to change them into armor inscriptions, it will be a bit troublesome." "Thank you for your trouble, fellow Taoist Chu," Xiaohua said with a slight smile. Chapter 31:21. Immediately, Chu Muhuan sat down cross-legged and took out a bag-like object from his sleeve. He patted his hand and took out the 4 treasures of the study and even a bamboo scroll. This. Xiaohua was stunned. Of course, he couldn't use divine sense, so Chu Muhuan had to carve inscriptions on the bamboo scroll. How else could he read it? The cloud crane flew very steadily, and Chu Muhuan's brush flew like it was flying. One by one, the inscriptions were written on the bamboo scroll, like dragons flying and phoenixes dancing, like golden hooks and silver strokes. It took Chu Muhuan less than a meal to finish writing it smoothly. Xiaohua really prostrated himself in admiration. That kind of admiration came from the bottom of his heart. "Chu, immortal friend," Xiaohua clapped his hands and praised, "Good writing skills, this Xiao is convinced." This is nothing." Chu Muhuan laughed. "My Confucian path of cultivation has the 6 arts of etiquette, music, archery, imperial, calligraphy, and mathematics as the foundation. If your writing skills aren't up to standard, how can you refine essence into qi?" Boom. Chu Muhuan's simple sentence immediately woke Xiaohua up like a bolt of lightning. That's right, Xiaohua only treated the core heart arts as a Tao sect cultivation method to cultivate. He didn't know that the core heart arts of Confucianism and Tao sect cultivation methods were fundamentally different. Xiaohua only wanted to refine the art of core, but if he didn't cultivate the 6 basic arts, how could he truly become a Confucian cultivator? "Many thanks, Chu, immortal friend." Xiaohua bowed to Chu Muhuan with heartfelt admiration. Oh! Chu Muhuan was caught unprepared. He thought Xiaohua was thanking him for the clear spirit eyes cultivation method, so he hastily got up and put away the 4 treasures of the study. He said, "Xiao, immortal friend doesn't need to be so polite. This cultivation method is the most basic. You can only see the records in the jade eyes. It's far from seeing through illusions, seeing through fabrications, or even understanding 1,000 miles. That's right, if Xiao, immortal friend is interested in the clear spirit eyes, you can ask my Chu family's patriarch for it in the future." Xiaohua didn't point it out. He smiled and took the bamboo scroll from Chu Muwan's hand. He immediately sat down cross-legged and said, "We'll talk about this later. This Xiao is going to study the secret technique. From now on, I'll leave everything to Dao friend Chu." Okay. Xiao Hua was so excited that he actually casually called Chu Muhuan fellow Taoist. Fortunately, the two of them were using the inscriptions on their armor to communicate, so Chu Muhuan might not be able to understand. He just casually responded and urged the cloud crane to fly into the distance. Seeing Xiao Hua actually sit down on the cloud crane, the distant Su Zhuoyang sighed in his heart, knowing that he had already lost an excellent opportunity. The night gradually faded, and dawn was breaking in the east. The bright light behind them quickly streaked across the sky and caught up with their hurried backs. However, looking at Su Zhuoyang's slightly anxious look, it was obvious that they were already a little too late. Unfortunately, fortune did not come in pairs and misfortune did not come singly. The West Sea was filled with sea beasts. Su Zhuoyang and the others had not encountered any powerful sea beasts even after flying for half a night. It was truly a stroke of luck. Now, the five of them had just spotted an island that was about 10 acres in size in the distance. Before they could even get close, a cold divine sense swept over them. Hiss, Su Zhuoyang sensed the divine will and immediately knew that the sea beasts on this island had powerful cultivations. He couldn't help but gasp. Almost without thinking, he waved his hand and shouted, "Let's go around this place. Don't disturb it." As he spoke, the sword light under Su Zhuoyang's feet turned, and he hurriedly tried to go around the island from another direction. Roar, a mournful roar rang out. In the center of the island, a splendor like a splash of water appeared. Then, a faint cloud appeared, and a strange-looking sea beast that was more than 20 feet tall flew into the sky on a demonic cloud, blocking Su Zhuoyang and the others' path. "This is bad," Leopard Spiritual Master cried out involuntarily behind Su Zhuoyang. "This sea beast cultivation is probably at the 4th or even 5th level of origin power. If we get entangled with it, even if we can defeat it, it will take a lot of time. It's going to be daybreak soon, dodge." Su Zhuoyang didn't say anything else. He pressed down on the sword light, turned around, and actually tried to fly away from another direction. The Rainbow Luan and Cloud Crane obviously could also sense the power of this sea beast. They cried out in unison and flapped their wings even harder, hoping that they could escape from this sea beast's obstruction. Huff! What sounded like a long moan was heard. The spiritual chi of heaven and earth within several miles of the island started to vibrate. Not only were the Rainbow Luan and Cloud Crane frightened, their bodies trembled slightly and their flight slowed down significantly. Even Su Zhuoyang and Leopard Spiritual Master's bodies were faintly flickering, and their flight speed had obviously decreased. Rustle. A sound like sand was heard. The sea beast's body moved strangely in midair, flashing past afterimages. Following the vibrations of the spiritual chi of heaven and earth, it appeared in front of Su Zhuoyang like a ripple. "This road was opened by me. This island was planted by me. If you wanted to pass through, leave a toll." The sea beast's voice was hoarse, and it wasn't clear at all. Xiao Hua was completely focused on the bamboo scroll in his hand. When he heard this, he only raised his head to look at it for a moment, then lowered it again. The sea beast seemed to be pentagonal, but it also seemed to be humanoid. A tumor several feet in size was erected on top of its seemingly soft body, and a four-cornered hole was expanding and contracting from time to time. The sound came from that hole. As for the surroundings of the hole, there were several tentacles about the thickness of a thumb. Above the tentacles, there were small balls of black and white. These black and white balls rotated left and right, just like a human's eyes. Fellow immortal. When Su Zhuoyang saw the sea beast blocking his path and saw how ferocious the sea beast was, he knew that he was in trouble. He smiled and said, "I don't know what fellow immortal wants to leave a toll. If I have it in my pocket, I will definitely give it to fellow immortal." Huff. The sea beast's entire body was trembling, and then some saliva flowed out from the hole in its body. Several of its tentacles seemed to be trembling, causing the several black and white balls to jump around. It seemed to be extremely excited. Its body, which was several feet in size, flapped slightly, and it actually pointed at Master Qing Qin. This? When Su Zhuoyang saw this, he immediately understood. This sea beast wasn't after money, but for sex. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Evil creature. Before Su Zhuoyang could speak again, Master Qing Qin shook her hand, and the space-splitting cauldron immediately flew out. She made a Dharma seal and waved her hand quickly. Boom! The entire space-splitting cauldron was like a volcanic eruption. A scarlet flame rushed out from it and fiercely rushed toward the sea beast. Previously, when Master Qing Qin faced Leopard Master and Xiao Hua, she had already used the space-splitting cauldron twice. During those 2 times, she didn't make a Dharma seal. Now, when she heard the sea beast's words, she immediately urged her mind power to make a Dharma seal. Of course, it was because the sea beast was too powerful. On the other hand, it was obvious that Master Qing Qin was very angry. Wherever the scarlet flame passed, there was a lot of white gas. At the edge of the white gas, there were faint black strands. Obviously, the heat of the flame was extremely high. Puff! The sea beast's body moved quickly, and it suddenly waved its tentacles. A clear water light appeared out of thin air, blocking in front of the flame pillar. However, as soon as the water light touched the flame, it immediately made a sizzling sound and also turned into white gas. Kill! Seeing that Master Qing Qin had made her move, Su Zhuoyang couldn't care less. He made a Dharma seal with his hand, and the flying sword under his feet rushed forward. The sword split into 4 and attacked the 4 corners of the sea beast. Immediately after, other than Xiao Hua, Leopard Master and Chu Muhuan also took out their own Dharma treasures. The rattan staff turned into a dark green rattan. It flashed brilliantly from bottom to top, like a fishing net that was about to trap the sea beast. From the mountain-containing box, a mountain-like yellow color flew out, and with a buzzing sound, it fell down like a thunderclap, roar. The sea beast was caught off guard. The water that it spat out had just been destroyed by the fire pillar, and the fire had already burned the lower half of the sea beast. Another sizzling sound of frying was heard, and a hole several feet in size appeared in the fire. Green liquid was still dripping from the hole, and an extremely unpleasant smell was emitted from the liquid. However, as the liquid dripped out, the flame of the cracked void cauldron was gradually extinguished. However, before the flames of the space-splitting cauldron could be extinguished, Su Zhuoyang's 4 streaks of sword light flashed past like lightning. The tentacles, which were several feet long, were immediately chopped off like tofu. The smooth wounds on the tentacles were also covered with green liquid. Not only that, the rattan wrapped around the sea beast, but before it could retract, Leopard Master's mountain came crashing down. With a boom, the sea beast was pressed down from the sky and smashed deeply into the island. The ground seemed to have sunk more than 3 feet. Seeing that his flying sword had succeeded, Su Zhuoyang frowned. He was in disbelief. Before he could use his 1,000 eyes to see what was going on, another unforeseen event occurred. Swoosh! A green brilliance pierced through the dark clouds like the sun. In an instant, it pierced through the mountain formed by the magnificent mountain box. Peng! With a loud sound, the yellow congealed mountain immediately exploded into pieces. Chu Muhuan did not have time to retract his rattan in time. From the connection point on the ground, there were crisp cracking sounds as it broke inch by inch. Chu Muhuan's expression changed greatly. He hurriedly shook his hand, and the rattan broke in the middle. Those that were close to Chu Muhuan quickly retracted, and the broken part had already turned into green spots before it fell from the sky. 3 feet deep in the ground, there was a violent vibration. A glaring brilliance flashed, and Su Zhuoyang could not help but close his 1,000 eyes that he had just used. Whoosh! When Su Zhuoyang opened his eyes again, a starfish that was a few feet in size was waving its tentacles. Its entire body was flashing with green light as it pounced toward Master Qing Qin. The starfish was extremely fast, and in an instant, it was in front of Master Qing Qin. The 5 waving tentacles emitted strange water ripples that covered Master Qing Qin's entire body. On the starfish's abdomen, the holes at the 4 corners trembled slightly, as if it was laughing wretchedly. Chapter 31:22. You're courting death. Master Qing Chen's whole body was filled with coldness, and a shuddering feeling arose from the bottom of her heart. It was as if this gaze had directly penetrated her monk robe. Almost without hesitation, Master Qing Chen hit the Buddha's seal that she had just formed on the space-splitting cauldron. A wisp of fire that was several times purer than before, but also several times smaller, rushed out like a red snake. Puff! The starfish's abdomen also sent out a wisp of cold water, which touched the fire. With a muffled sound, the fire was extinguished instantly. Master Qing Chen turned pale with fright. Her whole body was filled with Buddha's light, and she wanted to use other Buddhist magic. However, the starfish was too fast. Just as the Buddha's light was produced, the starfish's 5 tentacles had already covered Master Qing Chen's body. Although Master Qing Chen was sitting on the rainbow lawn, the tentacles were like a big hand holding Master Qing Chen, and the Buddha's light quickly melted in the starfish's green light. The starfish grabbed Master Qing Chen and immediately flew back. It seemed that this fellow's target was Master Qing Chen. Su Zhuoyang was shocked. While urging his flying sword, he hurriedly looked at Xiao Hua, who had not moved just now, on the cloud crane. However, Su Zhuoyang's gaze was everywhere, and the cloud crane's back was empty. He did not see Xiao Hua's figure. Evil creature! Not far away from Su Zhuoyang, Xiao Hua had appeared in front of the starfish at some point. His voice sounded coldly. I didn't want to make things difficult for you. But you actually learned from other bandits who occupied a mountain and robbed others. You even learned to rape others. I really can't stand it. I'll give you one more chance. Quickly put the sorcerer down, and I'll spare your life on account of your difficult cultivation. Su Zhuoyang smiled bitterly, but he did not take it seriously in his heart. Xiao Hua's words were all inscriptions. Even if the starfish had cultivated into a spirit, how could it understand them? Sure enough, the starfish seemed to know how powerful Xiao Hua was. His whole body flashed again, almost like a shadow flashing, making everyone unable to see which one was the real starfish. Crack, crack, crack. Just when Su Zhuoyang's 1,000-eyed pupils couldn't distinguish clearly, Xiao Hua waved his hand, and several hundred bolts of lightning fell from the sky, covering an area of 3,000 feet. All the phantoms were destroyed by this heavenly lightning without exception. The true form of the starfish was revealed. Oh no! Unfortunately, when Su Zhuoyang saw the starfish clearly, the joy he had just felt completely disappeared. Because in the middle of the purple lightning, the starfish's body also emitted green lightning, blocking Xiao Hua's lightning. This starfish also had the lightning attribute. Haha! Xiao Hua laughed. He glanced at the starfish's tentacles, and at Master Qing Chen, whose Buddhist light was already very dim, and knew that he couldn't delay any longer. With a clap of his hand, the spirit execution sword gourd appeared, and he laughed loudly. Treasure, please show yourself, whoosh. With a loud sound, 2 green and red spirit execution sword gourd flew out. That faint gray color, which seemed to have a nose and eyes, emerged from the sword gourd. The refined spirit execution sword gourd was indeed powerful. As soon as the sword light appeared, the starfish immediately stopped moving in midair. Haste! Xiao Hua chanted an incantation. The sword light rushed into the starfish's lightning. With a muffled puff, a stream of aqua-blue pus rushed out. The starfish immediately slid down from Master Qing Chen's almost completely disappeared Buddha's light like a tattered rag, falling onto the island. Xiao Hua released the spirit execution sword gourd and then killed the starfish. In just a few breaths' time, Su Zhuoyang and the others almost didn't see clearly what was going on with the spirit execution sword gourd. The starfish had already been killed, and they naturally couldn't help but exclaim in their hearts. They looked at each other, and their eyes flashed with shock and joy. As for Chu Muhuan, he was almost ecstatic. Thank you, Xiao Tan Yu. Master Qing Chen seemed to be still in shock, and his face flashed with slight panic. He put his palms together and flew in front of Xiao Hua, bowing and thanking him. The previous benefactor had been replaced with Tan Yu. You're welcome. Xiaohua put away the sword gourd and waved his hand. You and I are on the same side. I'm still waiting for that matter after this. Yes, this poor nun understands. Master Qingchen took a deep breath and said, just for Tan Yu's life-saving grace today, even if this poor nun has to use up her glib tongue, I will ask Zen Master to take action. Then this Xiao thanks you in advance. Xiaohua said with a smile, and his gaze fell on his left hand again. He did not put away the bamboo slip in his left hand at all. His magic power is boundless. This was Master Qingchen's evaluation of Xiaohua at this time. At this moment, her heart was in a mess. These sea beasts were not ordinary. Most of them were lustful creatures. She was a bhikkhuni. If she were to fall into the hands of these sea beasts, death would be the best outcome. She did not dare to imagine anything else. At this time, she really regretted it. She really should not have gone deep into this unpredictable West Sea for some greed. Fortunately, Xiao Tanyu is an expert. He is really my Buddhist sect's boundless protector. Suddenly, Master Qingchen had some understanding. It seemed that Xiaohua should have practiced the Buddhist sect's protector cultivation method. Although there was no Buddhist consciousness and no saraira, it made her feel close to him. However, looking at Xiaohua's indifferent look, she also knew that Xiaohua would not answer directly. Anyway, there was still a chance in the future. Master Qingchen sighed, stepped on a light cloud, and landed on the back of the colorful Wan, who was also in a daze, to rest for a while. Thank you. Su Zhuoyang wanted to say again, but Xiaohua waved his hand and said, don't mention it. Hurry up. We have wasted a lot of time again. If we delay any longer, I'm afraid we will be late. Yes, Su Zhuoyang nodded, but his eyes fell on the sea star corpse on the island and he reminded, fellow immortal Xiao, this sea beast's monster core can be used to refine medicine and refine qi, and there are many things on the corpse, can also be used to refine imperial weapons, magical weapons, and so on. Oh, is that so? Xiaohua's eyes left the bamboo slips, glanced at the sea beast corpse, and said with a smile, then I'll have to trouble you, fellow immortal Su. I want the monster core. As for the rest, please make the decision and distribute it to everyone, okay? Okay. Seeing that Xiaohua was so generous, Su Zhuoyang was overjoyed. This sea star was so powerful, and it was of the thunder attribute. Its physical body must be precious. Compared with it, the monster core was not that obvious. In Su Zhuoyang's eyes, Xiaohua gave up the precious body, but wanted the monster core. He was just looking for an excuse to save everyone's face. With such a shrewd overseas cultivator accompanying them to the West Sea lost treasure, how could Su Zhuoyang not be at ease? What Su Zhuoyang thought, Chu Muhuan, Master Qingchen, and Leopard Spiritual Master also understood. Some of their previous worries had long disappeared. Fellow immortals. Su Zhuoyang landed next to the sea star corpse, took out the monster core and gave it to Xiaohua. When Xiaohua casually took it and put it away, he said, after all, it will take time to divide the corpse. We'd better hurry. When we arrive at that place, I'll find some free time to distribute this thing, okay? It's okay, we'll listen to Su Tanyue's instructions. Master Qingchen nodded. This thing originally belonged to Xiao Tanyue. Now it's distributed to us, we can do it at any time. Okay, seeing that the others also nodded, Su Zhuoyang put away the sea star corpse, urged the sword light, and flew straight across the island toward the northwest. Xiaohua also got on the cloud crane, still looking down at the bamboo slips, as if nothing had happened. Alas! Seeing that Xiaohua was so calm, Chu Muhuan sighed in his heart. He understood that he could no longer treat Xiaohua as an ordinary overseas cultivator. Fellow immortal Chu. At this moment, Xiaohua put away the bamboo slips and said with a smile, I have something to ask. Fellow immortal Xiao, please ask. Chu Muhuan's face immediately piled up with a smile and replied. Fellow immortal Su just said that this monster core can be used to make medicine. What's going on? Xiaohua stretched out his hand and took out the bowl-sized monster core, which emitted a water-blue brilliance from the space. Seeing this monster core, Chu Muhuan was immediately frightened and hurriedly shouted, Fellow immortal Xiao, it's not easy to take this thing out here. You'd better put it away quickly. If other sea beasts see it, thousands of sea beasts will come to seek revenge. Even if fellow immortal has 3 heads and 6 arms, I'm afraid it'll be difficult for you to escape. Seeing Chu Muhuan's reaction, Xiaohua didn't dare to neglect and hurriedly put it away. Then he looked at Chu Muhuan and quietly waited for his explanation. Fellow immortal Xiao, you have Taoist cultivation. Presumably, you also know that Taoist cultivation steals the essence of heaven and earth for their own use. They blindly take from heaven and earth without asking for anything in return. Speaking up to here, Chu Muhuan seemed to be afraid that Xiaohua would be displeased and hurriedly explained, of course, as a cultivation path that is on par with our Confucian cultivation and Buddhist cultivation, although it has declined after our Confucian cultivation and Buddhist cultivation joined hands to exterminate it, its alchemy techniques are indeed somewhat unique. However, alchemy techniques also inherit the Taoist cultivation method. They also take a shortcut by seizing the essence of heaven and earth and refining it into medicinal pills. They use the medicinal effects of the pills to improve the cultivation of Taoist cultivators. Chu Muhuan thought for a moment and said, but this unique alchemy technique also provides us Confucian cultivators with a new path to take as a reference. Although we Confucian cultivators don't advocate using medicinal pills and other things to increase the speed of cultivation, when one's cultivation is unable to advance even an inch, this medicinal pill can also allow us to walk out of a situation where we are at the end of our rope and have no way out. Of course, this is a chance to live, but the road is short. It's far from being as far as relying solely on tempering the righteous energy in the chest. But on the other hand, the road of cultivation is long and endless. We search from top to bottom, and if we can take one more step, it's one more step. Who doesn't want to take a few more steps? Therefore, we Confucian cultivators now also have some alchemy techniques. Although they are not as exquisite as the Taoist alchemy techniques. Hearing this, Xiaohua didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He probed, that? When was the Taoist exterminated by us Confucian cultivators and Buddhist cultivation? To what extent has it declined now? In fact, it might not be appropriate for Xiaohua to say these words here. After leaving the Western Ocean, he could inquire as much as he wanted. However, Xiaohua was very curious. The Dan Rain continent claimed to have exterminated the Buddhist and Confucian cultivators, and the 3 continents claimed to have exterminated the Taoist cultivators. What was so strange about this? Chapter 31-23. This. Chu Muhuan shook his head. Taoism was exterminated in the ancient times. It disappeared for a long time. We didn't know there was such a cultivation path. Later on, we didn't know when it started, but Taoism was revived, and we slowly knew the secret. However, this Taoist disciple didn't have much fame in the 3 continents, and I know very little about it. Oh, right, doesn't fellow Taoist Xiao have Taoist cultivation? The previous one, was it a Taoist magic tool? Xiao Huan nodded slightly, but he was already absent-minded. Yes, on Xiaoyu continent, Xiao Hua knew that Buddhism and Confucian cultivators had been exterminated by Taoism and no longer existed. Confucian cultivators might have some insignificant inheritances in the Dan Rain continent, or perhaps in the millions of Meng Mountains. As for the Buddhist sect, they could be found in the ruins of the Buddhist sect. Now, the only cold bamboo was killed by Xiao Hua. Perhaps, it would be difficult to find any Buddhist sect disciples in the Dan Rain continent. However, on these 3 continents, things were actually the opposite. Everyone knew that Taoism had been exterminated by Buddhism and Confucian cultivators, and no longer existed. Although there was some revival now, the situation was similar to Buddhism and Confucian cultivators on Xiaoyu continent. Maybe even stronger than that. At least, Xiao Hua didn't become a rat on the street, and everyone didn't want to beat him. As an overseas cultivator, Xiao Hua could still show his Taoist cultivation and not be killed by Confucian and Buddhist cultivators. But the question was, who was the one who killed who? These 3 continents and Xiaoyu continent, what was going on? Could it be That this was also an independent world like Demon Realm and Demon Realm? Did I come here by chance through the space vein? Could it be that whatever formation was made by heaven? And I'm afraid so. Only a natural formation could have such power. No matter what nascent soul cultivator or spirit-severing cultivator entered, they wouldn't be able to return. Xiaohua immediately understood. Moreover, the space vein of these two worlds is actually in the depths of Gui He Si and Shi He Si. It's far from what I imagined. Hee, that's right, second senior brother didn't say where the space vein was. In the air, in the water, in the mountain rocks, maybe even in the flowers and plants. However, how did Confucian cultivators and Buddhist sects move to this world? Everyone, this is such a big deal. Forget it. Thinking of this, Xiaohua felt a headache coming on. This is an ancient secret. What does it have to do with this Xiao? Right now, I have a home that I can't return to. It's better for me to think about how to raise my cultivation. Only by reaching the level of the 10,000 Demon Realms Empress can one discover the spatial vein and return to the Dawn Rain continent. Xiaohua had gone through painstaking cultivation. Although his strength had not reached the level where he could challenge the spirit-severing stage, he had been suppressing the desire to return to the Dawn Rain continent from the depths of the Kuai He Si in a few days and give the person who had plotted against him a head-on blow. At the very least, he had to avenge the two vengeful souls in Yellow Flower Ridge. He had to kill two nascent soul cultivators for everyone to see. But now that he was in a different realm, it would be extremely difficult for him to go back. He could only let go of this blood feud. Whether it was Yuanying or Avatar, their lifespans were extremely long, enough for Xiaohua to find a spatial vein in the future and go back to take revenge. Of course, if he was unable to find the way back, Xiaohua would not be too disappointed in his heart. Everything that happened in the Dawn Rain continent basically had an effect. The two people who treated Xiaohua the best had now died. Their souls had fallen into Xiaohua's space. From now on, they would accompany Xiaohua at all times, never to be separated. Although Xiaohua would sometimes think of Fairy Hongxia, when he thought of Fairy Hongxia's appearance in those days and compared her to the dead Xue Xue, Xiaohua's heart would involuntarily calm down. Time was the best elixir. If Fairy Hongxia's feelings for him were sincere enough, then these feelings might not fade because of time. Thinking of Fairy Hongxia, Xiaohua could not help but smile bitterly again. Fairy Hongxia wanted to distance herself from him, leaving space and time for the two of them to calm down. And the heavens had also fulfilled her wish. It was just that this distance was beyond Xiaohua and Fairy Hongxia's imagination. The distance between two realms it was so far that Xiaohua could not imagine it. As for the time, it was far beyond Xiaohua's imagination. Xiaohua, who already knew the truth of the matter, had such thoughts. As for Fairy Hongxia, who also knew of Xiaohua's death, what did she think? The so-called time, the so-called space, those were the difference between life and death, the separation of yin and yang. This test could not be said to be not big, nor could it be said to be not far away. Who would know the result? Xiaohua's mood was somewhat gloomy. He lowered his head as if he was thinking. Chu Muhuan was somewhat baffled, but he did not dare to ask. Not only was Xiaohua's speech mysterious, his methods were also powerful. He was definitely the eccentric overseas rogue cultivator in his impression. After a while, the sky brightened. Xiaohua closed his eyes. His expression had already returned to normal. Clearly, he was comprehending the eye-clearing technique on the bamboo block. Xiaohua was calm, but Su Zhuoyang's face was abnormally anxious. He had opened up a distance of several tens of feet between the four of them. Unknowingly, he had already rushed in front of them. When the red sun rushed into the sky, the blue sky was clear as if it had been washed. On the blue sea surface, countless gray-white seabirds spread their wings and fluttered. The five of them arrived at the left side of a coral reef. This coral reef was roughly several li in size. It was either exposed above the sea surface or hidden below the sea surface. The multicolored corals were like flowers blooming in spring. They dyed the several li of sea surface, making them extremely easy to recognize. What was special was that on the coral reef facing the east, there was a protrusion about half a zhang tall. This protrusion seemed to be in the shape of a human, with a head and a face. Right now, facing the rising sun, it was like a child watching the sun. Sigh. From far away, Su Zhuoyang released his divine sense. When he saw the empty coral reef, he couldn't help but sigh. He turned his head to look at the people still following behind him and felt a wave of disappointment. Indeed, he had met up with the three of them, encountered Xiaohua, and then encountered the sea beasts halfway. The time spent in between was indeed too long. According to that person's cautious nature, he definitely wouldn't have waited here for too long. Perhaps his divination technique was really wrong. Or perhaps, this was the true auspicious omen. Without going deep into the lost treasure, how could he encounter danger? Su Zhuoyang's sword light converged. He stopped on the reef and stood with his hands clasped behind his back, looking into the distance. Fellow immortal Su, is this the place? Leopard Master was impatient. As soon as he saw Su Zhuoyang stop, he immediately called out. That's right. Su Zhuoyang's voice wasn't as loud as before. He said lightly, this is a hidden fisherman's reef in the West Sea. It's only a few li in circumference. Without a special route, it's not easy to find. That person asked us to meet here. Where is he? Master Qing Chen also flew over. He put away his rainbow wand and looked around curiously. The time has passed. Su Zhuoyang sighed. That person? I'm afraid he has already left. Su Swanzi. Leopard Master was displeased. He said somewhat anxiously, it's not that I want to criticize you. Isn't it better for you to set up the meeting place here than anything else? But the meeting place is so far away from here. We didn't encounter any particularly powerful sea beasts along the way. If there were any disturbances from sea beasts, how could our sect have arrived? Su Zhuoyang also smiled bitterly. He bowed and said, fellow immortals, it's all my fault. I've made you come here in vain. I apologize to you. It's okay, Su Xiangyue. Although Master Qing Chen was also somewhat regretful, he still comforted him. Xiangyue has already said that person was more cautious. This place was obviously chosen by him. He didn't want us to know. It's not your fault. If we don't go, maybe we won't have the fortune to not go. At this time, Xiaohua also flew over with Chu Muhuan. He was walking at the back. Their words were already filled with many inscriptions. However, Xiaohua only pricked up his ears. Looking at their expressions, he knew that it was already too late. He didn't care. It didn't matter whether they went to the West Sea lost treasure or not. Since it was a lost treasure, it was bound to be dangerous. He still had Jiang Lure in his space. It was best if they didn't take risks. He couldn't wait to return to the Elysium with Master Qing Chen. It depends on fate to get the West Sea lost treasure. For so many years, I don't know how many people have come to the West Sea to search for treasures, but I've never heard of anyone who got the West Sea lost treasure. We came late, so naturally, it's not fate. No one can be blamed. Chu Muhuan also comforted Su Zhuoyang. Su Swanzi, don't you have a telepathic spell? Leopard Taoist Master urged. Send one. Maybe that person is waiting for you. Su Zhuoyang shook his head and said, I don't have that person's telepathic spell. Everything was arranged by that person. If I did, I would have sent it last night. Forget it. Leopard Taoist Master was disheartened. He looked around and asked, I'm unfamiliar with this place. I don't know if there are any useful sea beasts nearby. You and the five of us can't come here in vain, right? It's also good to hunt some. Don't. Su Zhuoyang hurriedly waved his hand and said, this place is woo-woo. Just as Su Zhuoyang objected to Leopard Taoist Master, the sound of a tsunami came from the middle of the reef group. Everyone looked up and saw a brightly colored reef slowly emerging from the sea. When the reef came out of the sea, a head that was a few feet in size rose from the sea. This head was triangular. On top of it were two bright black eyes that were extremely careful. Behind the head was a slender neck that was connected to the reef. Under the reef was a body that was several feet in size. This body was like a huge millstone. Around the body were 4 thick legs that were several feet in size. Wow. What a big turtle! When Xiaohua saw this thing, he couldn't help but exclaim in his heart. This was the biggest turtle he had ever seen in his life. Chapter 31:24. Just as Xiaohua's astonishment was born, the tortoise's gaze swept over him. Hiss! Xiaohua's heart trembled and he sucked in a breath of cold air. He felt as if he had been seen through from the inside out. This tortoise? I'm afraid it has the strength of a late nascent soul stage. Xiaohua immediately made a simple judgment of the tortoise's cultivation. When Su Zhuoyang saw the tortoise appear, his face immediately filled with ecstasy. He hurriedly flew over but didn't dare to get too close. He stood in midair and saluted with cupped fists. Greetings, Senior Xian. The huge tortoise raised its head and let out a low roar. Waves of snow rolled up around its body and the spiritual energy of heaven and earth rushed into the tortoise's body. Immediately after, the tortoise's body flashed with a blue brilliance and rapidly shrank. In the blink of an eye, it turned into a short old man less than 3 feet tall. This old man had shifty eyes and a goatee on his lower jaw. In particular, this old man's back was a bit hunched and he carried a medium-sized tortoise shell on his back. Seeing the huge tortoise transform into a human, Xiaohua's eyes flashed with a strange light. However, when he saw the old man's appearance, he couldn't help but laugh. That's right, what was wrong with transforming into? Why did it have to be so ugly? Fortunately, the huge tortoise's transformation caused quite a stir. Just the waves near the coral reef were several feet tall. Amidst the sound of the waves, Xiaohua's faint laughter wasn't too obvious. Little friend Su. The huge tortoise's voice wasn't jerky. It even carried a trace of dignity as it said indifferently, "This old man didn't make an appointment with you at this time. This old man originally wanted to leave, but it just so happened that I didn't have to be on duty today, so I came here to rest a little. This old man wasn't waiting for you." Senior Xian. Su Zhuoyang looked at the cultivators behind him who didn't even dare to breathe loudly and hurriedly said with a smile, "This one knows that I came late. I can't keep my promise anymore. It's this one's fault. This one also doesn't want to say anything more. However, these are all fellow immortals that this one invited from the 3 continents. If Senior is willing, could this one introduce them?" And Senior Xian nodded, tacitly agreeing. Seeing that the huge tortoise didn't refuse, Su Zhuoyang already had an idea. He pointed at Chu Muhuan, Master Clean Dust, and Leopard Taoist Master and introduced them one by one. The 3 of them naturally also immediately came forward to greet him. Yes, that's right. This old man has heard of them before. Unfortunately, Senior Xian's expression did not change in the face of the 3 people's greetings, nor did he return their greetings. He only replied indifferently before turning his gaze to Xiaohua. "And this one? Are you the descendant of a great scholar on the hidden immortal continent?" "I'm afraid that Senior Xian is mistaken," Su Zhuoyang said with a smile. "This is fellow immortal Xiaohua Xiao. Although he was born in the Shi country of the hidden immortal continent, he is now a rogue cultivator of the West Sea." "Cultivators of the West Sea? How come I didn't know?" Senior Xian's eyes lit up and a layer of blue light flashed through them. Xiaohua felt a strange fluctuation sweep across his body. Then he heard Senior Xian say, "This old man knows most of the loose cultivators in the West Sea. Even if I don't know them, this old man knows where they came from. This little friend Xiao is a complete stranger." Hee, speaking of fellow immortal Xiao, I still have to tell Senior Xian in detail. Su Zhuoyang laughed even more happily. He looked at Xiaohua and said, "Fellow immortal Xiao, why don't you come and greet Senior Xian first?" "Yes, I'm Xiaohua." "Greetings, Senior Xian." Xiaohua was quite easygoing as he bowed and said, "Get up." Senior Xian seemed to have noticed that Xiaohua's cultivation was different. He did not treat the other 3 as he raised his hand and said, "This old man is Xian Qing, the deputy of the West Sea Patrol under the West Sea Dragon Palace. Since little friend Xiao is a West Sea rogue cultivator, you must have heard of this old man's name." "Siege West Sea Patrol." Whether it was Chu Muhuan, Master Qing Qin, or even Leopard Spiritual Master, they were all shocked. Their expressions became even more respectful as they understood Su Zhuoyang's previous words. Unfortunately, Xiaohua had never heard of this name. He only regarded the West Sea as the Guihe Sea. However, he immediately changed into a respectful expression and said in a deadpan manner, "That's right. Senior's name is known to all cultivators in the West Sea. Although I haven't been in the West Sea for long, I've also heard of your name. However, this one has never seen you before, so I don't know you." Xiaohua's words were quite archaic. Most of them were pronounced with the inscriptions of armor. Xiancheng could hardly understand them, but Xiaohua's respect was not fake. Then, Xiancheng was very satisfied with Xiaohua's respect and the other three's astonishment. He knew that his name was resounding and that Su Zhuoyang hadn't revealed anything, so he opened his mouth to ask about other things. However, Su Zhuoyang knew Xiaohua's ignorance and hurriedly said with a smile, "Speaking of fellow immortal Xiao, we're really fated to meet. We can be said to have become friends after a fight." Xiancheng was startled and asked curiously, "Could it be? Little friend Xiao wasn't invited by you?" "That's right," Su Zhuoyang hurriedly explained the whole story. "In the end," he said, "this is also a chance given to me and the patrol. That's the Great Heavenly Cycle Star Formation. I've only heard of it and have never seen it before." If fellow Immortal Chu had not seen the records of this formation before, you would have recognized it at a glance. I don't even dare to believe my eyes. With little friend Xiao, our great matter. And Xiancheng was originally somewhat reluctant in his heart. Now that he heard Su Zhuoyang's roundabout persuasion, his heart was moved again. After all, there were many cultivators who were proficient in formations, but there were very few cultivators who understood this kind of ancient vicious formation like the Great Heavenly Cycle Star Formation. Actually, we weren't a match for fellow Immortal Xiao at all. We were defeated by fellow Immortal Xiao in just a few rounds. Unfortunately, although he was born in Hidden Immortal Continent's U province, he wasn't proficient in our Hidden Immortal Continent's language. He only spoke the ancient inheritance of Confucian cultivators, so we spent a lot of time communicating with him. Su Zhuoyang struck while the iron was hot and said, "Moreover, when we passed through an island just now, we encountered a sea beast and were blocked. If it wasn't for fellow Immortal Xiao, it would have been difficult for us to escape." "Oh? Which island?" Xiancheng's small eyes flickered again. "Tell me first." After Su Zhuoyang finished speaking, Xiancheng's face was very stunned. He looked at Xiaohua with some disbelief and said, "That sea beast was extremely powerful. Back then, it didn't submit to my discipline. Although it was fiercely taught by me once, I knew that it was in my heart. However, this old man also understood that it was indeed fate that allowed it to take human form. It was just a hair away from being able to take human form. It wasn't any worse than this old man. In these years, it already didn't come out to stir up trouble and concentrated on cultivating. Therefore, I didn't remind you. Who knew? It was actually killed by little friend Xiao. It's really fate making fools of people." Yes. With this delay. I came late." Su Zhuoyang didn't miss the opportunity and said again. Although he didn't say anything, he had already attributed the reason for the delay to the sea beast. Finally, it faintly fell on Xiancheng. "Then I know. This matter can't be blamed on you. It was my negligence." Xiancheng nodded. "Thank you, Senior Xian." Su Zhuoyang was overjoyed. "Don't worry." Xiancheng waved his hand and looked at Xiaohua. "Little friend Xiao, what about the sea beast's demon core? Do you have any use for it?" Xiaohua was baffled and unconsciously looked at Su Zhuoyang. Su Zhuoyang hurriedly explained Xiancheng's meaning. "Oh, no use." Xiaohua took out the demon core without hesitation and directly handed it to Xiancheng. "If Senior Xian has any use for it, please take it. Little friend Xiao is really generous." Xiancheng was really stunned. Although he didn't reach out to take it, his two small eyes blinked and didn't leave the demon core in Xiaohua's hand. Senior Xian, this thing is useless to fellow Immortal Xiao. If you have a use for it, you can exchange it with fellow Immortal Xiao. There's no need to hesitate, Su Zhuoyang hurriedly said. Xianqing nodded and said, it's indeed so. One of this old man's divine abilities is precisely lacking that sea beast's inner core. If little friend Xiao has anything you wish to exchange for, feel free to say it. My West Sea Dragon Palace is filled with rare treasures. This old man will definitely satisfy you. After Su Zhuoyang finished speaking, Xiao Hua threw the demon core into Xianqing's hand. He said with a smile, Xiao Hua himself had many cultivation methods and countless spirit herbs. He didn't lack anything at all. As for the cultivation methods and rare treasures of the 3 continents, he was even more in the dark now. How could he make a suitable request? It was better to be generous now and look for an opportunity later. However, just as he opened his mouth, he was suddenly shocked in his heart. He thought of a cultivation method that he hadn't found for a long time. Therefore, Xiao Hua hurriedly changed his words and said, I am very interested in the West Sea's water escape technique. I wonder if Senior Xian can part with it? Water escape technique? When Su Zhuoyang heard this, he couldn't help but be stunned. He seemed to have never heard of this cultivation method. After Xiao Hua explained, Su Zhuoyang smiled and turned his head and said, Senior Xian, fellow immortal Xiao is very interested in the West Sea's water avoidance technique. I won't ask for other cultivation methods for fellow immortal Xiao. This water avoidance technique is an extremely common cultivation method in the West Sea. If Senior has it, you don't have to be stingy. Xianqing was very satisfied that Xiao Hua gave him the demon core without any conditions. When he heard that Xiao Hua only wanted the West Sea's water avoidance technique, he was even more happy. The water avoidance technique was something that could be seen everywhere in the West Sea Dragon Palace. Xiao Hua's words were obviously giving the demon core to him. As a result, Xianqing felt even more embarrassed. How could he take out a simple water avoidance technique? After thinking for a moment, Xianqing stretched out his hand and took out a square jade eye from his sleeve. He handed it to Xiao Hua and said, Fellow immortal Xiao, this is a water avoidance technique that I obtained when I accompanied the West Sea's army to conquer Jianghu. It is said that it was passed down from the Heavenly Abode River. Although this thing is not unique to my West Sea Dragon Palace, it is extremely mysterious. I'm afraid it is more suitable for you humans. This thing has been idle for thousands of years. I will give it to you now. Senior Xian, this is a good thing. I thank Senior on behalf of fellow immortal Xiao. Su Zhuoyang hurriedly replied and then explained to Xiao Hua. Great. Xiao Hua was overjoyed. He hurriedly received it and sent it into the space. He said respectfully, Many thanks for Senior Xian's gift. I am very grateful. Chapter 31-25. Good. Xianqing saw that Xiao Hua didn't even look at it. Obviously, he believed it and laughed. He took out a thin invite-like thing and handed it to Xiao Hua. Little friend Xiao, this is this old man's voice transmission spell. When you finish cultivating the water avoidance spell, you can come to the Dragon Palace for a while. After listening to Su Zhuoyang's explanation, Xiao Hua was overjoyed. He respectfully took the voice transmission spell and carefully put it away. Xiao Hua had already obtained a lot of treasures in the West Sea before he started searching for them. He didn't want to follow the crowd to the west. Seeing Xianqing like this, Su Zhuoyang was very happy. He knew that Xianqing was cautious by nature. He was as timid as a mouse. Otherwise, he wouldn't only contact him. He would take care of everything else. Even the location of the meeting was a secret. Moreover, he had an intuition that even if he could arrive in time, Xianqing might not appear in time or there might be other tests. As for the thing that Xianqing gave to Xiao Hua, Su Zhuoyang understood Xianqing's stinginess from the bottom of his heart. As Su Zhuoyang said, the water avoidance spell was nothing in the West Sea. It was different from the secret techniques of the Fecta sect. Any member of the water race in the West Sea Dragon Palace must know the water avoidance spell. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to enter the Dragon Palace. Of course, the water avoidance spell was the innate ability of the water race. Most of the water race couldn't use it. However, There were good and bad water avoidance spells. The origin energy consumed and the effects were different. Su Zhuoyang could tell that Xiancheng had at least dozens of water avoidance spells just by looking at his feet. However, Xiancheng didn't take out any water avoidance spell of the water race in the West Sea. Instead, he gave a water avoidance spell of the heavenly abode to Xiaohua. Su Zhuoyang didn't think that this water avoidance spell was anything special. However, he couldn't say anything about it. He could only say that this water avoidance spell was a good thing. Xiaohua didn't know any water avoidance spell. It was already good that he could get one from Xiancheng. Of course, Xiancheng had received benefits from Xiaohua. Although Xiaohua couldn't receive the corresponding rewards, these treasure hunts in the West Sea had been guaranteed. Xiancheng would definitely fulfill his promise and bring Su Zhuoyang and the others to the secret location of the West Sea. Furthermore, Su Zhuoyang already had a plan in his heart. If there were other fateful encounters in the West Sea relic, he would definitely think of Xiaohua and not let Xiaohua waste the inner core of a 4th grade essence Qi sea beast for nothing. Senior Xian. After Xiaohua put away the voice transmission spell, Su Zhuoyang probed, "This trip to the West Sea is really not easy for us, and it's really helpless that we missed the time. It wasn't easy for me to find a few good friends. Especially, being able to find a formation grandmaster like fellow Taoist Xiao has even increased our chances of finding treasures. What do you think?" Although Xiancheng had already somewhat loosened up, he still hadn't officially agreed to Su Zhuoyang's request. Hearing Su Zhuoyang's words, he was still somewhat hesitant. Looking at the rolling waves in the distance and the birds and fishes enjoying themselves, he said hesitantly, "We haven't even set out and already encountered a delay. I'm afraid this trip is inauspicious." Hee, Senior Xian knows. Before this junior came to the West Sea, I already used my sex divination technique to divine the location, Su Zhuoyang said with a smile. Without waiting for Su Zhuoyang to finish speaking, Xiancheng hastily called out, "What's the result?" "Naturally, it's an auspicious omen," Su Zhuoyang said with a smile. "Otherwise, how could I have arrived at the West Sea so smoothly?" A hint of joy flashed through Xiancheng's small eyes, but then he hesitated again. It seemed that he was really timid and cautious. "Little friend Xiao, what do you think?" Suddenly, Xiancheng turned his head and looked at the leisurely Xiaohua. Although Xiaohua didn't quite understand the words of the 3 continents, he still understood the first half of Xiancheng's sentence. Without any hesitation, he shrugged and spread his hands, saying, "I've already obtained the water avoidance art. I have nothing else to ask for. And, to be honest, I don't know what you're talking about. If you want to go, I'll go. If you don't want to go, I'm more than happy to oblige." At the side, Su Zhuoyang sighed in his heart. However, he still honestly explained Xiaohua's words to Xiancheng. Unexpectedly, Xiancheng laughed loudly and waved his hand, saying, "Since I was able to meet little friend Xiao, a formation master, and I was able to obtain that item, this in itself is an auspicious omen. How can we not go?" Good. Not only did Su Zhuoyang's suspended heart settle, but the others also showed joy on their faces. Everyone had come to the West Sea with great difficulty. Naturally, they weren't willing to return empty-handed. Quicks, without waiting for Su Zhuoyang and the others to speak, Xiancheng opened his mouth, and a water-blue brilliance flew out like a fountain. When it rushed into the air, it immediately turned into specks of fireflies and fell on the sea surface. As soon as these fireflies touched the water surface, they immediately trembled and spread out in all directions with incomparable speed. Xiancheng's figure fell from midair. His foot was stepping on the sea surface. His whole body moved up and down with the waves, and his eyes were closed. After the time it took to drink a cup of tea, Xiancheng opened his eyes. With a wave of his hand, he took out a walking stick from somewhere and said with a smile, "Let's go." Immediately, Xiancheng's figure didn't leave the water surface. He quickly floated towards the west. Looking at his speed, it was actually not slower than the flying of ordinary cultivators. Seeing Xiancheng fly away, Su Zhuoyang didn't need to say anything to Master Qing Chen and the others. That leopard Taoist master was the first to give chase. Master Qing Qin and Chu Muhuan naturally wouldn't release their mounts. Similarly, faint clouds and mist appeared under their feet, carrying the two of them to fly into the distance. "Let's go, fellow immortal Xiao." Su Zhuoyang originally wanted to urge his flying sword, but seeing that Xiao Hua still hadn't gotten up, he hurriedly said, "This is all thanks to fellow immortal Xiao. Later, there's no need to say too much to me." Xiao Hua waved his hand and said, "I don't care where we go on this trip. I'll only distribute things according to how much effort I put in." "Yes, I understand." Su Zhuoyang nodded. His figure flew along with the sword light, and he didn't forget to explain, "I definitely won't treat fellow immortal unfairly. Please rest assured, fellow immortal Xiao." Xiao Hua nodded slightly. His figure also turned into the wind, silently flying along with Su Zhuoyang. His mind was now on the bamboo slips, and he didn't care about Su Zhuoyang's words at all. With his cultivation, if he wanted to do something, could Su Zhuoyang and the others stop him? He didn't believe that these people didn't know this. Su Zhuoyang flew for a moment, then passed everyone and flew to Xiancheng's side. He seemed to be discussing something with Xiancheng. Behind the two of them was Leopard Taoist, followed by Master Qing Qin and Chu Muhuan. Xiao Hua himself was at the back. They watched as the sun rose from the east and reached the middle of the sky. Then, it passed by the crowd and left their backs behind. Fog rose above the surface of the sea. Dusk had arrived. The originally green sky was now dark. Although there was no blood red from the burning clouds, the orange-red sunlight shone down listlessly. The sea and the sky were filled with decadence. On the surface of the sea that didn't seem to have any signs at all, Xiancheng suddenly stopped. He waved his hand and immediately, a drop of water-blue brilliance fell into the sea. This brilliance was the same as the brilliance that Xiancheng spoke of earlier, rushing in all directions with incomparable speed. Xiancheng's words were too sudden, and Su Zhuoyang was caught off guard. His figure flew several feet away in an instant. When he stopped and saw Xiancheng casting the technique, he couldn't help but be stunned. He looked around and said with extreme astonishment, "Senior Xian, this is the place you were talking about?" "That's right." Xiancheng nodded indifferently. "It's here. It can't be." Su Zhuoyang knew that what he said was somewhat inappropriate, but he couldn't help but ask curiously, "The West Sea relic is in the depths of the West Sea, and the spiritual qi of heaven and earth is all dried up. I thought that we would have to fly to the extreme west for several days or even more than 10 days. How could we stop here? The spiritual qi here is abundant, and it's still very far from the extreme west. How could it be?" Su Zhuoyang said, "How could it be?" a few times. Wizard Qing Chen and the others also flew closer, and they were also puzzled. He who said that the West Sea relic must be in the extreme west. Who said that the West Sea relic must be in a place where the spiritual qi is dried up. Xiancheng sneered. "That's all hearsay. I've been patrolling the West Sea for who knows how many years, and I know the territory of the West Sea like the back of my hand. There is no spiritual qi in the extreme west, and the sea insects can't even grow there. How could the West Sea relic be there? But the West Sea relic was left behind because of the war that annihilated the Taoists. The war was so fierce that it caused the spiritual qi in the extreme west to be dried up, and it couldn't recover for 1,000,000 years. Chu Muhuan whispered, "So the West Sea relic went to the extreme west. Humph, this kind of baseless guess has ruined many immortals." Xiancheng didn't take it seriously. He looked at the rippling sea water and said, "They went to the extreme west where the spiritual qi was dried up. Not only did they not find the West Sea relic, but they also lost their lives there. There's something strange here." Leopard Immortal's withered yellow eyes turned slightly, and he suddenly said. Xiancheng raised his eyebrows and said with a smile, "Junior Leopard, you found something strange?" Leopard Immortal's face showed a trace of embarrassment, but Xiancheng's cultivation, age, and identity were enough to call him Junior Leopard. He could only point his finger and said, "I followed you all the way here. Although I didn't see any sea beasts, there were a lot of sea fish, sea shrimps, and seabirds. But here, It seems that there are no living creatures within a radius of 100 miles. Even seaweed and seaweed are rare. Yes, that's right. Master Qing Chen and the others hurriedly used their divine senses. Sure enough, they saw that the West Sea under their feet was exactly as Leopard Immortal said. Junior Leopard, you deserve to be a spiritual creature of the Thousand Demons' sacred realm. Xian Cheng praised, I've been patrolling the West Sea for who knows how many years, and I don't know how many times I've passed by here, but I've never found anything strange like this. Alas. Su Zhuoyang sighed and said, the territory of the West Sea is unimaginably vast. The sea surface of 100 miles is just a drop in the ocean. We've only been flying on the sword for a moment. How could we notice the situation here? Chapter 31:26. Then, Su Zhuoyang took out a jade eye and looked at it for a moment. He said with a wry smile, from the sea map given by Senior Xian, it seems that this place is much closer to the lava island than the Fisherman's Reef. My ink cloud pupil was found in this sea area. Xian Cheng said proudly, my friend Su must have seen it, right? Su Zhuoyang nodded. I've seen it a long time ago, and so have you. We all think that what is written in it should be true. But Master Qing Chen was a little puzzled. Since this is the location of the West Sea relic, then how could Ink Cloud Pupil be here? I don't know, Xian Cheng said with a smile, but in my opinion, this West Sea relic has been in the West Sea for a long time. I'm afraid that some immortals have already come to look for it. This Ink Cloud Pupil should be left by them after they failed to break the formation, right? Yes, you're right. Master Qing Chen nodded slightly, knowing that what Xian Cheng said was reasonable. In my early years, I secretly went down there according to the records of Ink Cloud Pupil. Xian Cheng said mysteriously, I've also seen the formation of the relic, so I sent a message to Su Zhuoyang and asked him to invite his best friends to come together. When everyone heard this, they looked at each other and were overjoyed. At the same time, they understood why Su Zhuoyang looked for them. Obviously, he had come prepared. All right, Xian Cheng spoke to everyone while looking at the surface of the sea. While this old man is inspecting the surrounding 10,000 li of sea, let's discuss everything that happened after we entered. Although there are many records in Ink Cloud Pupil, they are not detailed and many places are vague. We have to make a foolproof plan. Yes, I'll listen to your instructions. Su Zhuoyang nodded and agreed. But when he saw Xiao Hua, who was a few feet away from him, squinting his eyes as if he was comprehending something, he said with a smile, Fellow Immortal Xiao. Oh, please. Xiao Hua opened his eyes and said, Here, I can explain to fellow Immortal Xiao. This is the most famous West Sea relic among the 3 continents and 4 seas. According to old legends, it's the place where the ancient Taoists were annihilated. Su Zhuoyang did not hide it and explained, Fellow Immortal Xiao has Taoist cultivation. If you can get something from the relic, you will be like a tiger with wings. A relic of the West Sea? The place where the Dao sect was annihilated? Xiao Hua raised his brows in astonishment. No one knew that the Dao sect was living a carefree life in the Dawn Rain continent. Yes, I won't lie to you. Su Zhuoyang said solemnly, Fellow Immortal, if you can lend us a hand and go to the place where the treasures are, you will definitely be able to get a share that you like. Now, we need to discuss how to enter and how to deal with some unexpected situations. If Fellow Immortal is willing, I can explain everything to Fellow Immortal. Forget it. Xiao Hua waved his hand. That would be too troublesome. Why don't you all discuss this? If you need this Xiao's help, feel free to tell this Xiao. I trust Fellow Immortal Su. Su Zhuoyang's heart warmed. He bowed and said, Thank you for your trust, Fellow Immortal Xiao. Soon after, Xiao Hua comprehended the eye-clearing technique. Xian Cheng and the other 4 discussed their next move. Unknowingly, the night had already covered the entire horizon. Although there was a moon tonight, at some unknown time, the originally clear sky during the day was filled with clouds. The full moon was covered by thick clouds. The entire West Sea seemed to not have a trace of light. All right. Xian Cheng's voice was heard. Everything has been discussed more or less. It's useless to think too much. Let's talk about it after we go in. We have to act according to the situation. Yes, we will listen to Senior's instructions. Taoist Leopard and the others agreed in a low voice. Woo! A strange sound was heard, as if a hurricane was dancing. Xian Cheng raised the walking stick in his hand. The tip of the walking stick flashed with a gray brilliance, and the sound was heard, go. Xian Cheng pointed the walking stick at the surface of the sea. Woo woo woo. A ghost-like wailing sound was heard from a point on the sea surface. The spiritual energy within a radius of 100 miles surged towards this point. That small gray point suddenly swelled, and actually became a whirlpool the size of a bowl. Hua hua hua. Following the whirlpool, the sea water gradually expanded, and gradually went deeper. Hoo! Just when everyone's gaze fell on the whirlpool, Xian Cheng suddenly raised his head. His two small eyes were like pitch-black gems, flashing with brilliance as he looked at the distant night sky. Xiao Hua and the others were also greatly alarmed. They hurriedly turned their heads. Whoosh! Before the 5 people could see clearly, a crisp sound was heard from the sea surface 100 feet away. A thumb-sized jade light rushed into the air. A low and deep hiss was heard from that jade light. Countless waves rose from the sea surface out of nowhere and rushed into the jade light. Immediately, a huge python that was several tens of feet long and as thick as a water bucket appeared from the jade light. Xian Cheng's expression changed greatly. He said in astonishment, "Why are you here? You've been following this old man all this time?" Jijiji. An unusually coquettish and especially strange sharp sound came from the huge python's mouth. That huge python slowly shrunk again. After a moment, a monster with the upper body of a woman and the lower body of a python wearing tight armor appeared in front of everyone's eyes. This servant felt that you were strange. The snake woman opened her mouth and her snake tongue flashed out. She said in a sharp voice, "You're not on duty today. Why didn't you rest in the Dragon Palace? Instead, you sneaked out. So it turned out that you came here. It's just that this servant doesn't understand. What are you doing here?" Bai Hao Jiao. Xian Cheng sneered. "This old man is the deputy of the West Sea Patrol. You're also the deputy of the West Sea Patrol. In terms of age, you're still this old man's junior. What qualifications do you have to question this old man? If you want to follow this old man and find out this old man's shortcomings, then step on this old man to seek the position of the West Sea Patrol, then you're wrong." "How old geezer Xian, you finally said what's in your heart." Bai Hao Jiao laughed loudly. "I didn't expect that after enduring this servant for so many years, you finally said it today." How could this old man not know that you want to step on this old man to rise up?" Xian Cheng sneered. "You've stirred up this old man's wrongs in every possible way in front of the patrol, and you've even said this old man's shortcomings in front of the Dragon Palace's guards. You're just short of flattering the Dragon King of the West Sea." TSK. Bai Hao Jiao didn't seem to be angry. He smacked his lips and that strange snake tongue rapidly retracted. "You old fart, you don't have any ability at all. You only know how to patrol the sea and you're even blocking this servant's path. If this servant wants to be the patrol, then shouldn't this servant first move you away? You and I both know this very well. There's no need to say it clearly in front of outsiders. I just don't know why you dare to say the words you've been holding back for over 1,000 years today. If this servant hadn't followed you, I still don't know what you've united these people from the 3 continents to do here. What gave you the courage to do so? Is there any need for you to care what this old man does?" After Xian Cheng finished speaking, he seemed to have some regret. He waved his hand and said, "These are all this old man's close friends. This old man merely brought them out for a walk. Now that it's late, this old man will bring them back to the Dragon Palace." That's pretty good." Bai Hao Jiao nodded. "Since that's the case, this servant will return to the Dragon Palace and report to the patrol tomorrow, or invite a few close friends over. The sea scenery here is very beautiful. We'll have to stay here for a few more days." "That's right, old geezer Xian. How many days do you think this servant should ask for leave from the patrol?" Xian Cheng had never expected that there would be someone following behind him. Moreover, this person was the one he couldn't deal with the most, and the one who opposed him with equal harshness. Thinking of this, Xian Cheng's eyes flashed with ruthlessness. Heh, what? Old geezer Xian, do you still want to kill me? Bai Hao Jiao didn't seem to be afraid. She seemed to be teasing him, not to mention that this servant has already left my jade eyes before coming out. Even in this West Sea, you and I are both patrol deputies. Do you think, with these 5 people, you can definitely kill this servant? If you don't, as long as you make a move, your thousands of years of hiding and enduring hardships will all turn into flowing water. Not only will you not be able to surpass this servant, you will also be punished by the iron law of the West Sea Dragon Palace. Hearing this, Xian Cheng was immediately discouraged. He knew very well that in this West Sea he definitely couldn't kill Bai Hao Jiao. This was also one of the reasons why she dared to follow him. Since there's no other way, why don't you tell me your plan? Bai Hao Jiao chuckled. Hearing this, everyone felt a chill. If this servant is interested, perhaps, all right. Since things had come to this, Xian Cheng had no other choice. He could only tell the whole story in full detail. This place is really a treasure of the West Sea? Even though Bai Hao Jiao was also the patrol deputy of the West Sea, she didn't dare to believe Xian Cheng's words. If you don't believe me, feel free to leave. Xian Cheng said indifferently, this old man will take these fellow immortals down. Hee, even if this servant doesn't believe you, I still want to take a look. How could Bai Hao Jiao let go of such an excellent opportunity? She asked. However, how should this servant divide it with you? Naturally, it's 10%. Xian Cheng had already thought about it. He answered very helplessly. No, this servant wants 20%. Bai Hao Jiao replied without any trace of politeness. How is that possible? Xian Cheng almost jumped up in anger. He said furiously. Bai Hao Jiao glanced at Xiao Hua and the others. Her cold gaze caused goosebumps to rise on Xiao Hua and the others. If this servant's guess is correct, these fellow immortals will all get 10%. Bai Hao Jiao said indifferently, what about the remaining 50%? Old geezer Xian, you'll get 50%. This servant will get 20% and you'll get 30%. It's more than anyone else. Are you still not happy? Think about it yourself. If you don't agree, we'll go our separate ways. Not to mention you getting 50%, even if you get 100%, I'm afraid you won't get 30%. Chapter 31:27. Facing Bai Hao Jiao's threat, Xian Cheng was helpless. This was also the reason why even though he was an elder, he had always been suppressed by Bai Hao Jiao. Fine. Xian Cheng thought for a moment, then nodded and said, this old man agrees. However, you still have to contribute to this matter. Otherwise, this servant naturally knows this. Isn't there a saying in the hidden immortal continent? How can this servant be a freeloader? This servant will help you right now. Bai Hao Jiao said with a charming smile. Then he lowered his head to look at the whirlpool that was as thick as a bull's mouth and the hurricane that had already disappeared. He opened his mouth and roared. A blue light rushed out and landed on the whirlpool. Woo, that gust of wind swept up again, and the whirlpool rapidly expanded. A hurricane gradually formed around the whirlpool. When the whirlpool was 3 meters wide, Bai Hao Jiao swung his snake tail, and a layer of water blue runes strangely appeared and hit the hurricane. Whoosh, just like the upheaval that Xiao Hua encountered on the heavenly sea, the hurricane suddenly fell and smashed into the whirlpool. With a loud rumble, the whirlpool that was already 300 meters deep became even more turbulent and rushed into the depths of the Western Sea. Let's go, Xian Cheng sighed. Water mist appeared under his feet and carried his somewhat tired body into the whirlpool. Bai Hao Jiao and the others also followed. Xiao Hua was also the last to enter. When he entered the whirlpool, he looked inside and unconsciously stuck out his tongue, feeling an indescribable sense of disbelief. This was a channel of water that was 3 meters wide. The whirlpool spun from time to time, blocking the dark green water outside the whirlpool. This rotation was extremely fast, and what the naked eye could see was different. The spinning waves were frozen there like ice sculptures, extremely spectacular. Looking down, it was dark green again. The channel formed by the whirlpool seemed to extend as far as the eye could see. Boom! Just as Xiaohua entered the whirlpool, the dark green water behind him closed, and the water behind him chased after him. Xiaohua activated his vast righteous energy and used a sword technique to fly on his sword. His body directly fell into the sea. This island was actually very deep. It took the 7 of them 2 hours to reach the bottom of the sea. Xianqing waved his hand, and a pearl the size of a fist flew out of his hand. As the pearl's brilliance was waved out, the seawater within 100 feet of it was pushed away by the brilliance. Water avoidance pearl. Xiaohua's eyes lit up, and he couldn't help but smack his lips, secretly saying, "This is a good thing. Old Xian, is he here?" Bai Haojiao's gaze swept across the area. He saw that there were both silt and reefs at the bottom of the sea. There were also pitch-black things on the reefs. If he looked closely, he would see that those things were made up of tens of thousands of pitch-black insects. "Of course it's not here," Xianqing said coldly. "Come with me." "Heh, what's the point of hiding here?" Bai Haojiao sneered. He was not afraid of Xianqing having any tricks up his sleeve. He followed Xianqing and floated to a certain spot. The calmer Bai Haojiao was, the more guilty Xianqing felt. Even if he had some plans, he didn't dare to test them now. After the time it took to eat a meal, a pitch-black reef appeared before everyone's eyes. Xianqing listened down and pointed with a finger, saying, "It's here." "It seems there's nothing special about it." Bai Haojiao floated to the reef without a care. Blue light flashed in his eyes as he spoke in a strange manner. "You'll know once you use my West Sea's dusk transformation technique," Xianqing said indifferently. "This was originally cast by me, so I'll leave it to you. If you don't use your water spiritual power, how will you be worthy of the 20% of the lost treasure?" Dusk transformation technique? Why did you think of casting the dusk transformation technique here? Bai Haojiao was quite confused. "If you want the lost treasure and want to enter the treasury, then use it." Xianqing didn't answer him. Instead, he urged him. Bai Haojiao coldly looked at Xianqing, as if he was thinking about the truth of Xianqing's words. His slightly protruding snake eyes flashed with a faint scarlet light. Xianqing didn't show any weakness. Although there wasn't any special light in his beady eyes, he stared straight at the snake eyes without backing down. "I'm tired from casting the technique just now. I'll rest for a while more." Bai Haojiao's expression suddenly changed, and he smiled somewhat stiffly. "Haven't you always boasted that your cultivation is deeper than mine? Haven't you always said that I'm not worthy of being the vice patrol envoy in front of the patrol envoy? Why is it that I've just entered the West Seas lost my spiritual power today? Do you think I'll believe you?" Xianqing smiled faintly. "Of course, it's fine if you don't contribute. You must give up 5% of the share that we've just discussed." Old turtle shell. Are you threatening me?" Bai Haojiao's expression turned even colder as he said angrily. Hearing Bai Haojiao call him an old turtle shell, Xianqing's face turned red. He almost stuttered as he shouted, "You can contribute if you want. Cast the technique now. I'll enter the treasure house. Let's see what face you have to snatch credit from me." "Hee, so what if I snatch credit from you? It's not like I've been snatching it for a day or two." Bai Haojiao saw that Xianqing was anxious, and he was very happy in his heart. He smiled again and said, "However, today, I don't dare to not contribute. You can wait on the side." As he spoke, Bai Haojiao glanced at Su Zhuoyang and the others, and flew out from the light of the water avoidance pearl. Once Bai Haojiao fell into the sea, his body immediately flashed with blue water light. His body rapidly expanded, and in a moment he returned to his original form of a huge python that was dozens of feet long. Although they were at the bottom of the sea, the huge python's roar still reached Xiaohua's ears. Following the roar, the light of the water avoidance pearl quickly converged, and the surrounding sea water immediately swayed. An indescribable heavy pressure passed through the light, and Xiaohua's body immediately gave birth to a layer of faint dark golden light. Looking at Su Zhuoyang's body, he also gave birth to a silver-white light that protected him. Wizard Qin Chen's body flashed with Buddhist light, Chu Muhuan's body gave birth to a green gas, and Leopard Spiritual Master's thick earthy yellow demon aura transformed into a strange armor. Oh! Xiaohua's gaze fell on the flashing light around everyone, and he seemed to understand something. The four people's light was different, and their body attributes were probably not the same. The reason Su Zhuoyang and the others were here was to break the formation. Bai Haojiao rushed into the sea. Following her roar, layers of blue light were emitted from her huge body. Wherever the light passed, countless thin strands of light would rush against the light and rush into her body. Following the entry of these thin strands of light, the huge python's body gradually became crystal clear. When the huge python's body was almost transparent, the huge python's body twisted rapidly in midair, and the entire sea water at the bottom of the sea was completely stirred up by this huge python. Following the stirring of the seawater, a huge strange blue rune slowly emerged from the huge python's body. It was as if it was shedding its shell, and it fell inch by inch. After the time it took to eat half a meal, the huge python that seemed to have gone crazy slowly stopped. The surrounding seawater was still shaking violently, and it supported the huge rune as it fell onto the pitch-black reef that was several acres in size. Boom! There was also a huge sound, and the entire seabed was shaken. Xiaohua could even feel the impact of the reef under his feet. Following the descent of this rune, a layer of blue brilliance rapidly rippled across the entire pitch-black reef. Wherever the light passed, the pitch-black reefs would change visibly. The originally pitch-black worms instantly withered and dried up under the light of the twilight transformation technique, and then slowly solidified. By the time the entire reef was covered by the twilight transformation, all the pitch-black darkness had turned into a layer of withering, covering the reef like a tortoise's shell. The moment the twilight transformation disappeared, a layer of yellow sand slowly emerged from the four sides of the dried-up area. It was precisely the opposite of the twilight transformation's light that extended towards the center of the reef. Sha 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 sha. The sound of silkworms swallowing mulberry leaves echoed in everyone's ears. At this moment, Bai Haojiao had turned back into her human form. Her face was pale, and she didn't return to the light of the water avoidance pearl. Instead, she distanced herself from Xianqing, as if she was afraid that Xianqing would plot against her. However, her gaze was the same as Xiaohua and the others. She was very puzzled as she watched the yellow sand gradually cover the entire reef. Soon, the reef was completely covered in yellow sand, but the reef didn't change at all. Old tortoise shell. You dared to deceive this servant. Bai Haojiao's pale face suddenly became angry, and she hurriedly cursed. Ignorant. Xianqing sneered. This old man only said that the twilight transformation was effective, but I didn't say that it would succeed. If it was a simple twilight transformation, wouldn't this Western Sea's lost treasure have been discovered long ago? As he spoke, Xianqing reached into his bosom and took out a purple-red pearl smaller than his thumb. Although the pearl was small, it was extremely brilliant. Traces of purple and red lightning rapidly flashed within the pearl. An aura that Xiaohua was very familiar with emanated from the pearl. Lightning condensation pearl? Bai Haojiao frowned and asked curiously, could it be that you still want this item? Nonsense. Xianqing said coldly, do you think this old man's 30% was taken for free? This old man has only encountered 2 lightning condensation pearls in my life. Last time, this old man already used one to open the seal. This is the last one. If this time, we still can't break the formation and enter the treasury, this old man has no other choice. Bai Haojiao knew how precious this lightning condensation pearl was. Even the Western Sea Dragon Palace had a shortage of this item. If Xianqing used this item to break the seal, she could only comply with Xianqing's arrangements. Gotcha. Xianqing waved his hand, and the lightning condensation pearl landed on the yellow sand. He then pointed his finger, and a blue watery light rushed out, and the lightning condensation pearl immediately shattered. Zilala! Countless lightning bolts exploded from the pearl, as if 10,000 flood dragons had pounced onto the yellow sand. And those seemingly sturdy yellow sand instantly turned into powder under the lightning, disappearing into the water. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.